Also want to wish Happy New Year to staff with us today. Hopefully 2025 is enjoyable. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes of December 10th, 2024. Moved and second. All in favor? Contrary-minded? Thank you. First item on the agenda is PLN 24-012, the Shaw Group Limited, MPS and LUB amendments. And Debbie, you can begin when you're ready. Presenter number.
Sorry, I'm getting in.
That's okay.
There we go. So the applicant is Shaw Group Limited, and the subject site is located where the brick plant is currently located on the same property. It's a portion of that. It's outlined here in red. The total area of the property is 44.1 hectares, but the area of land under the application is approximately 1 hectare in size. And the proposal is to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw by changing the generalized future land use designation from industrial commercial IC to medium density residential neighborhood MR, and to rezone the same from industrial commercial IC to the townhouse R2T zone. So, as mentioned, the gray here is the industrial commercial zone. The purple is the village core. So the surrounding uses, there's a variety of surrounding uses. We have the Anglican Church, we have the post office, we have the volunteer fire department, we have the pool, we have a new commercial building here on the corner of Church Street and Highway 2, which has a restaurant and retail use. There's residential homes along Highway 2, and then Nutchucks is here at the end. Again, here's a satellite image showing the property outlined in red, or the area of the property under application, and currently the property is treed. So the purpose of the application is to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to allow for the development of 4 8-unit stacked townhouse buildings. In addition to the mapping amendments, land use bylaw text amendments are required in order to allow stacked townhouses to be used in a cluster townhouse format. The aim of the application is to accommodate affordable housing intended for workers of the Shaw Brick plant. The driveway for the proposed development would be located off Church Street, which is owned by the province. Parking for the townhouse units is proposed to be located in a common parking area in the center of the development, and the proposed location of the development is currently treed and is not being used as part of the brickyard. So again, Church Street is here, which is owned by the province. The driveway is to access off of Church Street. The parking is located in the middle here, and then there are 4 buildings, 8 units in them each of stacked townhouses, and they're located within the subject site, and they'll be linked to the parking area through walkways, and each unit will have its own amenity space. And this is just a concept, I should mention that this is just a concept plan, and if the mapping amendments are approved, so the applicant doesn't have to develop the land as shown here. This is just how they're imagining it at the moment. And they will be required to have buffers in between the proposed use and the existing residential uses here along Highway 2. And right now they're proposing to maintain a vegetative buffer along in between the 2 uses. And this is just a concept of what they're imagining that the proposed development will look like. As I mentioned, is also required to have land use bylaw amendments, and the following text amendments would be applicable to all townhouse R2T zoned properties. The proposed amendments would permit stacked townhouses to be developed in the same format as a cluster townhouse development. And so the definition for a stacked townhouse is proposed to be amended. So basically, instead of saying each unit has to have frontage on a public street, it says that it may have frontage on a public street. That way it allows some of the units to be turned inwards onto a driveway. And then also, in order to make the stacked townhouse frontage requirements the same as the cluster townhouses, we have the same minimum lot frontage requirements. Policy analysis. So we were requesting comments from our reviewing agencies. And policy IM11 of the municipal planning strategy is a policy that permits council to consider the proposed mapping amendments. East Hants Council has to determine if the proposed application is in the best interest of the municipality. An advertisement outlining the application and indicating that it had been received and was under review by staff was placed in the Chronicle Herald. A public information meeting is required for all amendments to the municipal planning strategy unless they are housekeeping in nature. A letter indicating the time and date of the PIM will be mailed to all property owners within 300 meters of the subject property. And we're measuring from the entire subject property, not just the little portion that would eventually be subdivided off. Additional advertising will be placed in the East Hants website and on our social media feeds. And also, to facilitate a public information meeting on February 4th, we're asking that a public information meeting be held on February 4th. We have several public information meetings on the docket, and if we don't deal with some of them in February, we could end up with 5 of them in March, which wouldn't be great. So we're recommending that the motion will have to pass today at the council policy and in-camera discussion, and it's recommended that the motion is passed today, and if it's not, then the public information meeting will be held on March 4th. So here's our flow chart, and we're just at the initial start of this application, and this is today's initial staff report, and then we'll move to a public information meeting and go forward from there. And the recommendation is that Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie, for the presentation. First up to speak, Councillor McPhee. Your light's on here.
Have mine on, okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, through you to staff, I just wondering about the definition of a stacked townhouse. It's not an apartment, it's not a condo, so,
No, so a stacked townhouse is basically, the units are divided vertically and horizontally, and every unit has a front door. So there are new ones going up in Lance currently. I can't remember the name of the road that's on Mariah Drive, I believe. And all of those stacked townhouses have the front doors facing the public street. So those are stacked townhouses. So you have some units on the bottom, you have some units on the top, and they're divided both horizontally and vertically.
so they're still rental units.
Oh, they're still rental. They
So
still could be
they're
rental units or
basically,
condo units.
Apartments, just they don't have a corridor in the,
Yeah.
yeah, they each have their own
Yeah, so these
entrance
wouldn't have a corridor. They would
have their own entrance.
own entrance, yes.
And now what, do they have more than one entrance to the stacked townhouse? I'm just thinking of fire.
That would be up to the building code, what they need for egress out of the building, yeah. Depending on the design. It doesn't, under the land use bylaw, there's no requirement to have a second access.
Oh, okay. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tingley.
Through the chair, staff, thanks for the report. The site is already zoned for industrial use, you say?
Yes, through Mr. Chair, the current zoning and land use designation is industrial commercial IC.
Okay. I think it should go to a public information meeting, so I'm going to move the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting to consider an application from the Shaw Group Limited to amend the MPS and LUB by changing the land use designation of a portion of PID 450-86980 to medium-density residential neighborhood and rezoning the same portion of the land to townhouse RT or R2T zone.
Moved in second. Before the motion, I have two councillors wishing to share. Councillor Graydon Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Shaw's has a lot of property. They have a lot of projects, apartments that they've already built and others in the queue that they are preparing to build. So they are proposing that they are putting these up because they are for employees.
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. What the company indicated is that they have an aging workforce and they need to have people come into the community and be able to afford to live in the community, to work at the plant to replace the aging workforce. And this is one way to ensure that there's affordable living adjacent to the actual plant itself.
So they're proposing that it's affordable rates?
Yes, I haven't talked about the details, but they're hoping to keep the costs down so that way that they can offer them at affordable rates.
Okay, and as well, so would this be offered to current I'm sure they have employees who are struggling to make a go of it. Have they mentioned that these units would be offered to current employees or only future employees that they're bringing in?
I'd have to confirm with the applicant.
Okay, that's just something that if this were to go further, I'd be wondering about. As well, when I look at this, I've already heard rumblings from residents who are out in front of this. As I say, lots of property. They have lots of property. Can you go up to the map that shows the proposed units? This is another indication, or it's another example of people thinking what they're going to get isn't always necessarily the case, for sure. The back two that are in closer to the plant, people wouldn't have an issue with those ones. It's the front ones in people's backyards that I have a concern with, that a couple people who have approached me have a concern with. So, as Councillor Tingley said, I will be willing to agree to go to an information meeting on this, a public information meeting, and see what kind of response we have from the public on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick question. It's currently marked in as industrial commercial, so failure for this project to go through, Shaw's could build an industrial building there of some sort, excuse me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, they could use it for industrial commercial uses. They'd still have to meet the setbacks of the industrial commercial zone. I'm not quite sure what that is off the top of my head. But they could extend, for example, the laydown area here and extend it back farther, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all, Councillor? Warden Ralston.
Understanding that what they're providing is just a concept plan, but generally speaking, it looks to me as if we're only looking at two-story buildings.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, right now they'd be stacked, so you'd have 4 units on the bottom, 4 units on the top. 2 stories. I think under the zone, you're allowed to do 11 meters as of right in height.
So that pretty much, you could do 3 maybe.
You could do 3, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Nobody left. We'll go to the vote. And the votes are in, and the vote is passed unanimously. Thank you, Debbie, for the report. Next item on the agenda is mini homes as accessory dwelling units. Leanne, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in June of 2024, East Hants Municipal Council passed the following motion, directing staff to review land use regulations that are preventing small manufactured housing units from being used as accessory dwelling units. So currently, under the East Hants land use bylaw, mini homes are not permitted to be used as an accessory dwelling unit within a residential zone. So that would be the R1, R2, CR, and LR zones under section 6.2.5. Mini home dwellings are also not permitted as a main use within any of our residential zones. So section 6.2.5 specifically relates to the width to length ratio for residential buildings. And it specifically states that the length of the dwelling must not exceed the most common minimum width by a ratio of 3:1. And it also specifically states that mini home dwellings, as per our definition, are not permitted. So should PAC and council wish to consider allowing smaller mini homes as accessory dwelling units, an amendment to remove the section which states that mini home dwellings are not permitted would be required, so removing the section in red. It would maintain the 3:1 ratio. And as per the permitted uses table within the land use bylaw, mini homes would still not be permitted as a main use within a residential zone. Also, there's regulations under section 3.14, which is our accessory dwelling unit regulations, which include design requirements that would also prohibit the use of a mini home. Currently, the regulation states that an accessory dwelling unit must match the main dwelling in building material type, cladding color, roof type, and roof pitch. Shipping containers designed as garden suites are exempt from this requirement. So an amendment would also be required to exempt mini homes from the garden suite height requirement and design requirements. That should be considered if you're looking at allowing these units. No other proposed changes to the accessory dwelling unit regulations are proposed. In addition, there are municipal planning strategy policy amendments in order to permit smaller mini homes as accessory dwelling units. So policy RD2, RD16, and RD21 all specifically reference that a accessory dwelling unit shall be designed to maintain the appearance of a single detached dwelling. So an amendment to remove the requirement that it should be designed as a single detached dwelling would also be required. So these are some examples that if the amendments were to be approved, these types of mini homes would now be permitted. So this is a 40 by 16 unit that would be permitted. This is a 48 by 16, which would be the largest by the 3:1 ratio, so we would not be able to get any longer than this one. And just a third example, which is a 40 by 16. So these types of mini homes would now be permitted, provided they meet all the other lot area requirements and setback requirements that are in the land use bylaw. So citizen engagements, so there will be an advertisement in an upcoming edition of the Chronicle Herald, just indicating that the amendments are under review. And as there is amendments required to the municipal planning strategy, a public information meeting is required in order to hear input from the community. So there will be a notice of the public information meeting, if authorized, in the Chronicle Herald as well as on the municipal website. So as this is the early stages, we are looking at that approval be given to schedule a public information meeting. And that is the recommendation coming forward today, is that Planning Advisory Committee recommend that council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Councilor Tingley.
Through the chair, another thorough report. I think this needs to go to the public for input as well, so I'm going to move that Planning Advisory Committee recommends the council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to permit small mini homes as an accessory dwelling units.
So moved in second. On before the motion. Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is good report. And is that in all area of the municipality or just in a rural area? Like, is it in a serviced area too?
Through you, Mr. Chair, these amendments would apply to the entire municipality.
In terms.
Yeah.
Okay, and one more question, like, you showed two picture of the mini homes. So is it, if it's going like the second picture, if it's wider than the house itself, is that gonna be allowed, or? Like if the house is 20 feet and this 40 feet behind it, or 46 feet, 48, it's gonna be awkward, like, if you can fit it behind it anyway, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no regulation that we have that says it has to be smaller than the main dwelling. It would have to be positioned in a way that can meet the rear setbacks and the side setbacks, so. And the 80, yeah, so the regulation for an accessory dwelling unit is that it cannot be more than 80% of the gross floor area of your main dwelling. So if it can meet, if it's smaller than that, then, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through you to staff. Many homes and accessory dwellings, are they required to have their own septic system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no.
They can be.
They have to provide something that shows they have the capacity to connect into the existing
So
system.
they could be hooked into another system on that property then?
Yes. Right, yeah.
As long as the environmental approval?
Yeah, like I said, we have to receive something, usually upon permit, that shows that they can accommodate, their existing system can accommodate the additional load on the
Yeah,
system.
very good, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rhino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fully in support of the motion because to me, it's somewhat of a no-brainer. If if shipping containers are used as accessory dwellings are exempt from design requirements, then, it only makes sense that the mini homes would far exceed a shipping container. But I guess because I was before the motion, my attention is drawn to accessory dwellings unit exterior must match the dwelling in material type, cladding, color, roof type, roof pitch. I guess my question to the staff, are we not being somewhat restrictive? I can somewhat agree with color, but roof type, roof pitch, and the same cladding, I mean, I know that's just for looks, but really, if I can't see any, I think it's really too restrictive, and I'd like to hear staff's perspective on that, because that's maybe something that we could be a little bit more lenient on and change.
I'll go to the director.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we did that when these regulations came in. This was new ground for East Hants to allow accessory dwelling units, so we wanted to make sure that there was community acceptance, so that's why those architectural requirements were put there. I would suggest, I guess, not to wrap up the time in this review, because there's actually somebody waiting to put one of these on a property. This is something we could look at in the next plan review, the design requirements.
So, if I may, when would that pen it, how far down the line are we looking for a planning review that we could maybe adjust things like this? Because if there is kind of a run at the bank for accessory dwellings, I wouldn't want them to be so restrictive as to be identical to what's there. In color, yeah, I can kind of agree with, but the whole purpose of this is to make extra housing out there with regard, and there's a lot of seniors who are putting, kids are putting their seniors on accessory dwellings on the same property, so I don't know if we want, in my mind, I can't get my head wrapped around this, why be so restrictive on something like that? So how long would we be looking for maybe to look into these thing, see, like this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're looking actually to start next year in 2026 for the next, because that'll be 10 full years from our last full review, which was 2016.
Well, to me, here's a year that people have to be fairly restrictive. Is there any avenue that we could look at this sooner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can, and like this, you could ask us to do some one-off amendments, but, we're quite busy, and there are a lot of these things sort of in the hopper, so my preference would be to wait until the review, but, we'll obviously do what council directs us to.
Okay, I'll take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Merriam.
Thank you through the chair to staff. A question about the picture examples that are shown. In the second picture, I just want, the bottom one, the dimensions, if I understand correctly, it is length to width 3:1, correct? That is still the restriction. Is it just me or I know it's just an example, but that to me looks more like 5:1. Am I wrong? I mean, I know it's just an example, but I guess my question is, would that be allowed? I don't think so, because it has to be, that is my question, it has to be 3:1, correct?
Yep.
It just visually, that looks a little longer to me,
Yeah.
but,
It's 16 by 48.
yes. Yeah, okay. The other question was, I was just wondering, what is the rationale for shipping containers not being exempt from this? Is there a backstory, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was actually, if I remember correctly, that wasn't a staff-generated suggestion. Council directed us to include that. I think shipping containers were in the news at the time. There were a lot of people looking to convert them into dwellings, and Council of the Day decided to have that included.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Just to touch on Councillor Merriam's comment there. So Council of the Day decided to have the shipping containers included as possible dwellings, but excluded from the criteria of making them match any kind of... So it does. It's odd to me because they can be so unsightly. Why did we leave them out of that criteria? Why did we leave them out of that criteria? I'm looking at the wrong people. It just,
Which
Yeah.
goes along with mine.
I mean, and I understand what Councillor Rhino is saying as well, but the shipping container thing is like just glaring at me of all this, is that why we would choose the most potentially unsightly dwellings to leave out of any criteria for what they should look like. Anyway, maybe we can touch on that at another time. But on the second page, so you may have touched on this already, but I just need to. A development permit shall not be issued for a residential dwelling. No, sorry, can you scroll up just a little further? Okay. Under the East Hants land use bylaw, mini home dwellings are not permitted as a main use within a residential zone. Okay, so that's just as it says. Mini homes are not permitted as a main use in a residential zone.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so if you have a vacant piece of land in an R1 zone, it's not, in a service lot, it cannot be a mini home.
Okay, so when Councillor Musa just said, is this across the board? So it can't be permitted as the main building, but now it's going to be permitted as a secondary unit?
Yep.
So say in the subdivision in White Estates, if someone has a big lot, there's no mini homes and they're not permitted, but they can be permitted to have one in their backyard, up to potentially. So when you talk about a small mini home, is there any limit on that? So if one was if one was 20 feet wide, that means it could be 60 feet long? If the lot was able to accommodate it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so the mini home would still have to meet the minimum or the maximum size, which is 80% up to 80 square meters, which is 861 square feet. So that's the maximum size you could do, as well as the 3-to-1 ratio. So the maximum is 16, like 16 by 48. This would be the longest, biggest that you could
Oh,
do.
that's the biggest that they make? Or the
No,
biggest that
they
you've
make
got?
bigger ones, but
Okay, so that's
they would
what I'm
still have to
wondering.
meet the maximum size, which is the
Okay.
861 square feet. A lot of them are bigger than that, as well as the 3-to-1 ratio, as well as the setback requirements. And so with the 3-to-1 ratio, like a 16 by 48 would be
Right.
the longest you could do, or a 14 by 42, I think. if you-
Because of the 800 and,
because of that and the 3-to-1 ratio.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Ralston.
Thank you. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't remember why we decided to exempt shipping containers, but I remember there was a lot of discussion about it. With the mini homes, just wanted to put some clarification in. This would apply throughout the municipality, but only in what they refer to as residential zones, do not include rural use and rural use 2. Mini homes are certainly allowed as primary dwelling units in those zones. And also, with regards to the design requirements, over the next year or so, well, these are exempt from the design requirements. This policy would exempt mini homes from having to look like the original homes, similar to the exemption granted to shipping container homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Counselor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now with our regulations, if your 3-to-1 is not considered mini home, so right now we can build it 16 by 48. If you want to build it, like it's not manufactured, if you want to build something in the backyard, you're allowed to do it because it's not 3-to-1, more than 3-to-1, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the 3-to-1 would still apply, but
Yes,
this
but
is
as
only
of now,
specific. Yeah, this is only
as of right
specific
now, you
to-
could build 3-to-1 anywhere.
Yeah, correct.
So
yeah.
the only thing we're changing, if you can get a manufactured one, put it there, but you already can build it there already, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not changing anything except being able to ship from the manufacturer instead of building it on the property. Okay,
Yes.
that doesn't make any, like, it's no different than buying it already made and building it, so we're not making big changes there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rhino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to kind of clarify what the warden said and make sure that that is correct. With this policy is accepted, the recommendation, the motion is accepted. That would mean, is it true that what the warden has stated, that a mini home does not have to meet the design requirements the same as a stick-built would, if this passes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if these amendments go through, the proposal would be to exempt mini homes from the design requirements.
Whoa, back the train up right here and now, because that's not right. Because if you have a stick-built home, they gotta be exactly stick-built accessory dwelling. It has to be similar to that. But yet we can put an old container in there, and build that to a house or whatever we need to, an accessory dwelling. Now we can put a mini home that can have a mansard roof, come sort of a regular pitch roof, or can have a shed roof on it. So if we wait another year, I think that's being a disservice to the people who are wanting to stick-build these accessory dwellings. We gotta be consistent, and if this passes, we are showing inconsistency with the design and build of these accessory dwellings. We should have to make this right away, and I don't know what I have to do to change this, whether I can create another motion after this is to change this, but we gotta show some kind of consistency with regard to building in here and not be so restrictive on the stick-built accessory dwellings. Now, is that correct, that they can, I guess I've been told that they don't have to meet those designs?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's what these proposals are. I guess if you wanted us to look at the current regulations, that would probably be another motion
Okay,
that has
so,
to come forward.
Mr. Chair, through you to the director, can I create a motion after this motion is dealt with on the floor that will have us review this and somehow change this quicker than a year out than this planning review? Is that correct? Can I do that and move this along a lot quicker?
Go ahead, John.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you could, or you could even amend this motion directing us to remove the architectural requirements, period.
Okay.
My only concern with that is we are trying to move this along quickly and get it to a public information meeting early next month. So, Leanne will have to go back and look at those regulations to make sure that we get it right before we
So
do
if
that.
I made a friendly amendment to this motion requiring that we remove all the design requirements for all types of housing on this area, then is that going to hold this process up in any time, or can we still carry on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I hope not, but it might. I mean, we need to go back and look at all the regulations because they are linked. Sometimes you'll have 3 or 4 different sections in that land use bylaw that are linked, and you have to make sure you do the cross-referencing and so on.
Personally, I'm not concerned so much about the length. The 3-to-1 I can live with, but the pitch and the cladding and everything else, I think that it's really too restrictive in that, and we're not treating this whole policy is inadequate because stick-built houses are now too restrictive compared to an old metal box and a mini home. So, hearing what somebody else may have to say, I may move an amendment to this.
The motion on the floor deals with a public hearing, so you're gonna do something after that?
Well, all right, I'm gonna move an amendment that that staff come back with a report on with regard to design requirements for stick-built on these accessory dwellings.
Can you make that motion after we vote on this
Okay,
motion?
that's not that can't be taken as an amendment?
No,
or
because we're
separate
talking about a
motion?
public hearing.
Okay, I'll make that another motion after we deal with this one.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Keith. Last one wishing to speak is Warden Rolston.
Okay, I'm certainly going to support the motion to go to public hearing. Maybe my comments would be better directed should Councilor Rhino make his motion following this, but I just want to put out there that mini homes and container homes are much more portable than stick-built homes. So should the need for an accessory dwelling unit no longer exist, it would be much easier to remove a mini home or a container home than perhaps a stick-built home. And that perhaps that might be why you would want a few different criteria for a permanent stick-built home than for a manufactured home of some kind. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. We'll go to the vote since nobody's left. We're voting on the public hearing. And the motion is passed unanimously. Back to you, Councilor Rhino.
Yes, I would move that staff be authorized to bring back a report on the design requirements for accessory dwellings with consideration being given around stick-built accessory dwellings, and that report be in would be as soon as possible, not to drag this process out for another year. I think, you know, we should be dealing with some of these, and I'd like to hear have a report pros and cons with regarding to removing that. I so move.
Moved in second. Staff, you understand the request? Warden Rolston.
Couple of questions. First, through you to staff, will that bump something of importance further down the line to get this report? Is it something you can do reasonably quickly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not necessarily, like that, as soon as tomorrow we'll meet and we'll talk about the current package of amendments and whether or not we could actually include this with what we're doing now. And if we can, then that won't hold things up. If for whatever reason we decide that we can't, and then we'll go do the PIM for the other amendments and move on, then it will bump something. I don't know what it will bump, but I mean, the more work there is, the more, you know, the slower everything is.
And secondly, these residential zones that we're talking about, not all of them, but some of them have design requirements on the main dwelling? Yes or no?
Oops. Go ahead, Leanne.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no design requirements for the main dwelling.
Okay. Now, this is for the main dwelling unit. If I were to build a home in any of these residential zones, a main dwelling unit, not an accessory unit, I would not be subject to any design requirements?
Not other than the 3-to-1 ratio. There's no criteria for color or roof pitch or anything like that.
So in these communities that are R1, whatever the zoning is, where this would apply to, you could have a yellow bungalow next to a purple 3-story house, next to an orange split level. You could have all manner of colors and designs along the same street.
Yes.
Okay, then that makes me lean a little more towards being less restrictive to the accessory dwelling units if there's no restrictions on the units themselves. Because it's, you know, what are you making your accessory dwelling look like? The house on the lot that you're building it on, or the house next to it that might even be closer to it than the house on the lot? So anyway, I'll be interested in seeing the report, and I'll support the motion for a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councilor Merriman.
Thank you. Through to staff. Can we just back up a moment and the stick-built home terminology? I'm getting a little lost in some of the terminology. So help me out again. So with the motion, the previous motion that was approved, I guess my question is for clarification. What are, with that motion, the requirements to look like the adjacent home? And then I'm getting lost with what the change to the stick-built home terminology, how that would change. So could you just please go over that again? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment is for allowing mini homes as accessory dwelling units.
Yes.
Which the proposal is to exempt them from the design requirements.
So the previous motion was exempting from the design requirements, so it could look different from the adjacent original house, correct?
Right, well, as a package of amendments, but
Yes.
that's what would be proposed.
So that's what the original motion was. Now the stick-built terminology, I'm getting a bit lost there. What does that mean? And can you just dumb that down for me a bit, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So mini homes are the manufactured in a factory. They arrive on site.
Yes.
Stick-built is if you just built it yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me again, how does the stick-built in the amended motion, what are we saying there? Can we just go over what that amended motion looks like again?
There's no amended motion, Councilor.
Oh, sorry,
It's a new.
or the second
Second
motion.
motion?
The second motion, yes. So could we just go over what that looks
yeah.
like again, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the second motion that was made is for staff to review the design requirements that are currently in the land use bylaw, which are what's up on the screen right now, that if you were to build an accessory dwelling unit, that it must match the building type, cladding color, roof pitch.
Okay.
So that's what that motion is referencing.
So that second motion really is addressing what someone could perceive as more restrictive requirements on the stick built, where
Correct.
the other one doesn't have that same
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Understand, thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Nobody left to speak, we'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Leanne. Next item on the agenda is concept plans and rezoning applications. Rachel, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So last year, council passed a motion that said moved that staff look at circumstances surrounding the rezoning of land. So the motion was passed due to frustrations from the public arising from concept plans being presented during rezoning applications and then a development being constructed which differs from the concept plan. And this may be due to the developer changing their plans for the property, or could be due to the land being sold and a different developer building on that property. So the land use bylaw includes a variety of zones, and each zone has regulations permitting the land uses and the physical requirements for developing on the property. And those requirements could be regarding building size, setbacks from property boundaries, height limits, maximum building sizes, etc. Some zones also have a more detailed list of requirements, which may include landscaping, location of parking, boundary screening, etc. So I've just included on the presentation the different types of processes for development. So we have as-of-right development, and this is where the majority of permits are issued, is through as-of-right, and it's reviewed and approved by a development officer. We have site plan approval, which is reviewed and approved by the development officer, but there are details provided to the public, communicated to the public with this type of application. Development agreement is reviewed and approved by council, and this is a contract between council and the developer. And then finally, rezoning applications reviewed and approved by council. And it sets the zone whereby the development officer approves as of right or site plan approval. So the rezoning will establish a new zone for the property, and then the development officer will then process that permit as per noted there. So if council approves a rezoning application, the property owner is then able to develop their property in accordance with the regulations in the land use bylaw at the time they decide to develop their property, which could either be as of right or through site plan approval. The regulations in the land use bylaw sets out the elements by which the development can be approved. And the site plan submitted with the rezoning application has no bearing on whether the development officer permits the development. So the development officer will approve the development based on the regulations that council approved to be included in the land use bylaw. The development officer cannot refuse to issue a permit or approve a site plan approval if the site plan differs from the site plan that was submitted with the rezoning application. So this causes frustrations with the public when they see a site plan during a rezoning and do not fully understand that the plan should be considered as a concept only and should not be relied upon to consider the specific impacts to them. The public may also not consider that if a property is sold following a rezoning, the new property owner, they may have different plans for the property. There is no legislative framework to compel the developer to build as per the site plan submitted with the rezoning application. So in the report and the presentation here, I've included 4 options for consideration by Planning Advisory Committee and the pros and cons that have been identified based on those options. So the first one would be enable developments more widely through development agreements. It would give more certainty to the public but it would also generate additional work. It would cost more for the developer. And in the 2016 plan review, council tried to move away from requiring many development agreements for the reasons noted in the report. Then greater use of site plan approval. So this is information on what has been approved by the development officer is provided to the public. But site plan approval is already required for many of the zones which the public have raised concerns about. And this includes multi-unit residential, village core, mixed-use centre and regional commercial. So this staff feel that this wouldn't necessarily address some of those frustrations that have been raised. So third option would be not require site plans be submitted with rezoning applications. It would remove the current frustrations as there would be no initial site plan that the public base their understanding on. But policies in the MPS would need to be amended as there are some which have criteria for considering site plans submitted with a rezoning application. And without this information, it can be difficult for nearby property owners to visualize what could occur on the property. And the fourth option is better communication from the municipality that the site plan should be considered a concept only. So it would strengthen the message to the public. There'd be no cost or staff resources associated with this. There may still be some people that do not understand the messaging around the use of concept plans, but staff hope that with this increase in communication, this will be limited. Staff have already included in staff reports and presentations that the actual development following a rezoning may differ from the site plan submitted with that application. And also in drafting of this report, staff have identified additional improved communications to the public that staff could implement. So, you know, we could add additional bullet points to the presentations, strengthen that discussion there, add notes to the webpage for planning application and also to the questionnaire and letter that the actual site plan and developer may be different than in the current site plan and developer, and that the developer will have to comply with the requirements of the land use bylaw, and also providing the public with the information on what that looks like. So what would be the maximum height? What would be the floor area, maximum floor area? What would be the setbacks? So to conclude, other than improved communication, staff do not recommend any of the additional options outlined. Changes to the regulations to have greater use of development agreements and or site plan approval has a potential staffing resource that will add further permitting requirements to developers. And even if a site plan approval application is required, following a rezoning, the site plan submitted would not have to match the one that was submitted with the rezoning. So staff do not recommend removing the requirement for the submission of a site plan with a rezoning application, and there may be consequences of making it more challenging to understand the potential impacts from the developments. So the recommendation is to direct staff to improve communications to the public regarding the impact from rezoning applications. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Wishing to speak? Councilor Rhino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I brought this to light. And I brought this to light for the reason that we've had some developers come in here or say they were developers. They made an application to change the zone. They come up with a concept plan or a plan, you know, and we go through the motions. We have a public hearing. People come to this public hearing and thinking this is going to be what's going to be built on that. I think if, you know, we're eroding the public trust put in us when we allow this to happen. You know, why can't we, if a developer comes forward and wants to change the zoning to develop this plan, why, you know, they put this plan forward, then why couldn't we have it so 2 years if they have to develop this property as presented, or it reverts back to the previous zoning requirement? Why can't we do that? Because, you know, a lot of people out there have very little trust in government. And when they come to a public hearing expecting, you know, and they listen to it, expecting that this property will be built, and then they turn around and it's sold within a very short period of time to someone else, then we got to go through the whole process again. To me, it's wasting staff time. It's wasting our time to come here, knowing full well that this person who wanted the zoning change is not going to build on it. They're trying to sell it to get it zoned to increase the profit. And I think, to me, that's fundamentally wrong. And to me, a better system would be, okay, whatever you proposed, if you don't build that, the zoning now reverts back after 2 years. I really believe that, because then that would eliminate some of these people that are getting it rezoned to up their profit for selling, and then we have to go through this whole process through the public again, wasting staff time, to me, and wasting my time. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so there's no ability to change the zone back without having to go through that process again to rezone it. Once that zone, the new zone is established, then that's there, it's in place. If council wanted to then change that zone back to the prior zone, then they would have to go through the same process, public information meeting and a public hearing and all the steps that you went through to establish the original zone. I think in most cases, there's a cost associated with the rezoning application. So there is an intent there to develop the property and it may be sold on to someone else, but there's no ability to kind of control that process. Once it's sold, the new developer gets the ability to build as per the zone that's in place at that time.
Excuse me if I may, but can't we, as a government body, put those controls in place that this couldn't happen? Are we restricted by the MGA to do that? Because we are a government body. We do control, or supposedly have the authority to deal with development within the municipality. Why couldn't we put those controls in to eliminate the waste of time? It's just the public are fed up. They go away thinking, oh, this is going to be built, and it's not. And like I say, you can preach to them that, this is only a concept. Well, to me, they're just going to say, why waste my time and go to a public hearing and have my input if it's never going to be this way? So to me, we are a government body. Can you tell me if there's any way that we're not allowed to put a stipulation in or a rule or a bylaw or whatever into that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so we do go back to the Municipal Government Act, and in terms of the rezoning process that's set out there, the only way you would be able to have some level of control to say if this development it hasn't occurred within a certain amount of time is really through a development agreement. You would have the development agreement implemented, and if that hasn't begun, the development agreement can be discharged. So there are criteria written in the development agreement that enable that to happen. So if you wanted to have, or council wants to have that control, that would be probably the best approach. But there is an impact there in terms of that actually would generate more work for staff and for council to review those applications. And then in 2016, there was a move by council to move away from those development agreements because of those reasons, the time, resources, and the costs. So you council could have that greater control, but there are downsides to that as well.
To me, the greater control would be beneficial. But like I said, I hate to waste time, and to me, it's wasting our time, it's wasting staff time to do this right over again when we know full well that certain person who rezoning is not going to carry through with this. And this is what is so frustrating, sitting here and sitting in that public gallery. It's just total frustration. And if you want to get more involvement in that, I think we should be eliminating that frustration, and I think that's something we could do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to mention that if that was a direction that council wanted to go, that's quite a significant change to your policy documents in terms of identifying where development agreements should be required. So it would take some work to figure out in what areas you would want to make that change. So there is quite a bit of work in figuring that out if that's a direction that council wants to take.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Musa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you said you're gonna have more communication with the resident about the zone. So are you gonna send him all the information what can be done on this zone, or just point at some.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we can improve. So right now we send a letter, and with that letter, we call it an information sheet regarding the developments. It's usually a 2-pager where we provide some, information on the application. I think we can improve that by providing more information on what the actual zone permits, rather than in the past, we've shown a copy of the site plan. We've provided some basic information, but I think we can improve that and think about some of the language we use and images that we use to help people to understand what could be done, not just what the site plan shows, but other things. Like, that's just one concept for the site. There are a number of other ideas that could be developed on the site, and we want to be able to provide that information to the public.
I 100% with that, because as a counselor, sometimes I spend 2 hours to be able to find the regulation in a zone somewhere. Like, it's not very easy to manipulate through our site yet, so I like to see better movement on our site too. And one more thing, like, if somebody doing a rezoning from, let's say, R2 to R2T, and they're applying for 2 stories, and they're allowed to go 3 stories, right? So that's where I think the development agreement could be beneficial to us and to the developer, because once a developer put the development agreement that he's gonna put only 2 stories and stuff, so that will take from the public, the resident, neighboring resident, that he's not gonna, okay, he did the development agreement, he's serious, he's not gonna go 3 stories. He's gonna limit himself to 2 stories. So I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. You could leave it as optional for the developer to give more insurance to the neighboring properties that he's here to put a nice development that's well suited within the community. So if you're applying for 2 stories homes and you go with the 3, so that's a big change for the next door neighbor. So if we leave them the option to go for a development agreement, I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Councillor. Warden Rolston?
Thank you. I believe we're beginning to blur the lines somewhat between a rezoning and a development agreement. A rezoning is a rezoning. It is an ask by someone to change the zone on the property. It is incumbent upon us as committee and council to understand what is allowed in that requested zone. And if we're not sure, we should be asking staff, what is the most allowed in this zone? And then we have to decide if that's something we think is appropriate for that particular property, because rezonings are not appealable, unlike development agreements. So number one, it's incumbent on us to understand that that site plan is simply one example of something that could be built should the rezoning be successful. I do think there can be some improved communication, as simply as putting language there that says, this is one example of what could go on the property should it be rezoned. Please be aware that the height could increase to 3 stories should the rezoning succeed. Make the public aware of things like that. And some of them will listen and some won't. But if you put the information out there and you make them aware of it, then we will get the feedback from the public that said, oh, well, I thought this would be all right based on that concept plan, but if this is passed and they could change that and go to 3 stories, we wouldn't like it. Then that gives us the information that we need to base our decision on as to whether we think it's a good fit or not. I don't think going back to a whole lot more development agreements is perhaps the way to go, because we have many, many rezonings which are fine. But I do think we can do a better job of explaining rezoning requests when they come into the public, and if there's a site plan or a site plan concept there, don't even always use the word concept. This is an example of what may be built if this rezoning is passed. But please be aware, the square footage could increase to this much. The stories could increase to this much. and just lay it out there as to what in the mind of the public sometime, what the worst case scenario could be if the rezoning gets passed, and get that information out there. And then, like I said, I think it's incumbent upon us to read what the public feels is appropriate or not, and for us to decide whether we think it's appropriate or not, depending on the location. There are downsides to going to more development agreements: more time, more expense, and more appeals. So I think there are situations when rezonings are entirely appropriate and places when development agreements are appropriate. And I think we've got a bit of a handle on that right now. There was a time when there were a lot of rezonings being requested here that I was not a fan of. It just seemed like everybody that bought an R1 lot wanted to rezone it to R2, and boom, bang, boom, it was done. But I don't think it's quite that simple anymore. I think we've tightened up that process, and so I'm not inclined at this time to ask staff to do a 180 on what we've been directing them to do over the past number of years, but I do certainly support the provision of more information and putting more emphasis on that information, and state it not once, not twice, but maybe 3 times. This plan is simply an example of what might or could be built should the rezoning be approved. Please be aware that they could go as high as X number of stories or as large as X number of square feet, X number of units. Just put that information out there. People can read and write, and they can understand that. And anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. I'm going to go to the director who wishes to share.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to that, in discussing this report, we also talked about a couple other visual aids I think might help people. One of them would be a site plan that actually shows the entire building envelope, where a building could be built on the lot, just not what the developer is proposing. And then also sort of a 3D model of a theoretical building that could be built on the site, showing the entire bulk, height, and density that could be put on that lot. So I think those 2 visual aids will help a lot. And to Councillor Moose's point, we already have built into a number of zones. You know, you can do so much as of right, and then if you want to do more, you have to do a development agreement. So for example, in the R3 zone, you can build a 24-unit building, and if you want to do more, then you need to come back for a development agreement. So, you know, there already is some of that in your plan now. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that information. Councilor Dixon.
Thank you. Through you to the staff, I guess the comments, the concept drawings, basically what John was getting at was adding more information so they have an idea what can and can't be done and through things. So that's just repeating that. And just to make a comment on Keith Rhino's proposal for the future would be that if we do a time period or time span on the development, like 24 months, we should also be able to allow a chance for the contractor to come back and appeal to make it longer. There may be a reason that's not under our control, flooding or something like that. So he has to have a time period, or should be out of the time period to extend that. I think that should be taken into consideration if he pursues it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so with the rezoning, there is no time period. The zone's in place, and that's it.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the motion, yes, I'll support this. Communication's great. I hope you can get it across to the general public that the concept plan is a concept. Unfortunately, communication's a two-way street. We can talk, you can talk. You can't make people actually hear. So my thoughts, get rid of the concept plan entirely, because that seems to be where the confusion is. We can explain out to people what R1 is, R2 is, R3 is, answer questions and concepts. But once they see that, and I'm thinking of the Bakery Lane development, specifically 2 different concept plans brought to us. People think that's exactly what's going to be built. You can tell them that it's concept, that doesn't have to be built, but that's what people have in their head. They're not hearing any other communication. So I'll support the motion, but I think the best thing to do would be remove concept plans altogether. And then people can ask their questions at the public information meetings shortly. Then if they don't hear what the answers are, well, they don't hear what the answers are. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff and maybe council, I just want to remind everyone and everyone who may be watching on the live stream that the reason why we're discussing this today is because we've come to numerous hearings with public who the outcome of what's happening to properties bordering their homes very much matters to them. And they are seeing contractors or developers who own the properties coming in with very well put together plans on what they're going to do on these properties, to the point where they're discussing about foliage and where the garbage is going to be and how this is all going to play out. And yes, to the general public who's sitting in the foyer or sitting here, they're hanging on what they're saying is that this is what's going to happen. And I don't blame them at all. So this is where this is stemming from. So yes, we do need to inform them more. Instead of saying 2-story, as in this recent Shaw application, it's 2 to 3-story, but the big word should be on that, 11-meter maximum. So then that's a height. That's not a number of stories. Then that's a height that you're dealing with. Those are the kinds of details that need to be included in it and what the setbacks are. As far as, we're just trying to alleviate the problem of them thinking, because what's happening is developers are getting the approval and then bang, 2 days later is in Bakery Lane, there's a sign on it for sale. So this is what we're dealing with here. And I agree, any information that we can get out to the public to preempt this confusion is what we're aiming for here. Anything more than that, I think, would be redundant. But I'm totally sympathetic to the public and what they're coming in and hearing and thinking that that's going to take place. So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rhino.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very interested in what Councillor McPhee has said. That, to me, may be the problem in itself. Can we take away that concept plan that they're coming in with? And that way, nobody's being led down the garden path, or nobody takes it under their assumption that this is going to be built. If they want to rezone from X to Y, then staff put a presentation together with, here's what's allowed in Y if we change this. There has been some discussion on what may go on this, but that's only preliminary. And that way, to me, that would serve what I'm after is it would take away the confusion of what people think is going to be built on that site, right? And then I think then the case is solved. If we don't have to sit here, it's like Councillor Garden Cole said, we get so much to where the garbage going, we get so much to where the barriers going and this and people, no wonder people go away with thinking this is what's going to be done, and then the next day it's sold, and then we have to come back to the whole process again with regard to seeing a different concept plan. So is that something, through you to the director, is that something that we can eliminate and change that way? Because to me, that would serve that would be perfect. That would leave them with no thoughts of what may or is going on that property.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I did include that information in the report. It's up here on the presentation. So one of the options was to not require site plans be submitted with rezoning applications. So as has just been discussed, there's definitely pros to that. There would be some needs. Currently, your policies in the municipal planning strategy, or council's policies in the municipal planning strategy, it has criteria that is reviewed against that site plan. So there would need to be some changes to the MPS to take away some of that review process. And then again, it could potentially cause it to be more difficult to visualize, but with some increased communication, we could probably cut back on some of that confusion. Talking about maximum height, setbacks, and all those things that we've already discussed. But that option is included there on the presentation in the table.
Well, I have to apologize, 'cause I read that twice and I did not pick up on that, so that's my own fault. But if we just totally eliminated that concept plan and not saying, and just have staff do the report saying, here's what could be built at this, there's a possibility of X, Y being built, but there's been no plan put in front. At least then they could, to me, it would straighten the whole process right out. And I think Councillor McPhee is right on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll go to the Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as Rachel pointed out, you could change that policy and do that, but I know the first question that will come after you do that is, well, what is the developer actually proposing to do there? So I think there is a lot of value in those concept plans, even though we have to always put the caveat that it's not an ironclad thing. I still think there is value in those concepts. And I think, just off the top of my head, probably 70% of the concepts we see are actually built more or less the way they show them to us. There are exceptions, of course, but anyway, I still think there are value in them, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Councillor Tingley?
Through the chair and to staff, thank you for the report. I think it's a thorough report, and your recommendation was to improve the communication. I'm going to recommend the motion. The Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council direct staff to improve communication to the public as outlined in the staff report.
Okay, moved in second. Nobody left to speak. We'll go to the vote. Oh, excuse me. A late request to speak. I'll give you leeway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that leeway. Does that motion contain the possibility of taking out the concept plans?
No.
No.
Okay, then you know where my vote's gonna go. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed with Councillor Rhino voting nay. Thank you, Rachel. Next item on the agenda is the Housing Accelerated Fund Initiative, Village Core Zone Density Increase. Debbie, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So East Hants entered into a HIF funding agreement with CMHC on February 23rd, 2024. As part of the agreement, East Hants must fulfill 9 initiatives to receive all of the funding. Initiative 9 requires that East Hants increase the density from a maximum of 12 dwelling units permitted as of right to a maximum of 16 dwelling units permitted as of right through site plan approval in the Village Core VC zone. In order to complete the initiative, amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw are required. Amendments will impact all Village Core zones. The purpose of the Village Core Zone designation is to allow for a diverse mixture of retail, service, business, and residential uses in an environment serving both pedestrian and vehicle needs within an aesthetically pleasing, socially interactive streetscape serving both the local and a community-wide population. Under the land use bylaw, property owners are permitted to construct a maximum of 12 dwelling units as of right through site plan approval, and that's what you're currently allowed to do now. The property owner can also has the option to apply for a development agreement for multiple dwelling unit uses in excess of 12 dwelling units up to a maximum of 20 dwelling units per 0.5 hectares in the Village Core Zone. To prevent the Village Core Zone from becoming a residential zone and to protect the integrity of this mixed-use zone, staff recommend that the HAF requirement of permitting 16 dwelling units as of right be combined with a commercial component. Commercial development is essential for continued development of healthy village cores where residents can walk to local commercial uses. It is equally important to have land available for the continued development of commercial businesses that support the community and increase the East Hants commercial tax base. So planning staff have worked with economic and business development staff, and we've come up with an option where the dwelling unit increase and recommend ensuring that a minimum of 75% of that ground floor street frontage be used for commercial uses for buildings between 13 and 16 dwelling units. So this is just an example here. It's a 3-story building, and as you can see, about 75% of that would be used as a ground floor street-facing frontage for commercial purposes, and then the remainder 25% could be used for residential or could be used for another purpose. There would be no minimum gross floor area attached to the commercial area. So that requirement will preserve the streetscape and the commercial presence, but it will allow the developer to construct dwelling units on the ground floor where there is no street frontage. So really, we want to keep that street frontage activated and to allow for that for commercial development. Now, the exception to that is commercial requirements wouldn't be applicable to the existing flag lots. Because our village cores are older areas, there are existing flag lots. I counted between about 10 to 15 of them in the quarter area. And so in those areas, that commercial component wouldn't be required. You could do 16 units without the commercial component. So in addition to allowing for an increase to the number of dwelling units, both the maximum gross floor area and the maximum building height would have to increase to enable the increase in the number of dwelling units. So staff recommend that the maximum gross floor area increase to 1,584 square meters from the 835 square meters currently. An increase in the gross floor area will enable the development of 16 two-bedroom apartments and commercial floor area on the ground floor. A variety of unit sizes could be constructed as long as the floor area is not exceeded. To accommodate the additional dwelling units, staff recommend permitting a maximum of 3 stories without having the 3rd story constructed in the roof line. So to assist Planning Advisory Committee in visualizing a building size of 1,584 square meters, we've created an illustration here showing the potential size of that building footprint and if that footprint was evenly distributed over 3 floors. So this is the Enfield Village Core. So these are the existing buildings here in the green, showing the footprints, and this would be what the proposed building footprint would be of a building that was 1,584 square meters over 3 floors. It's similar in size to the Parker Place. Now, Parker Place has a little jaunt in the back, but it's basically around the same size. This is only a sample of what the building footprint may be if it was evenly divided over those 3 floors, and it could be larger if it was over 2 floors. So citizen engagement, planning staff will comply with the citizen engagement policies of the municipal plan and strategy when processing these amendments. So we require an advertisement outlining the proposed amendments, and it will be placed in the Chronicle Herald and on the municipal website. And a public information meeting is required for all amendments to the municipal planning strategy. A public information meeting would be advertised on the municipal website and on social media and will be held in the municipal office building. And notes from the meeting will be included in the next staff report. So in conclusion, to increase the number of dwelling units in the Village Core VC zone was a commitment that East Hants made when entering into the Housing Accelerator Fund program. The new regulations will be applicable to all Village Core VC zones, and existing design requirements will still be applicable to all new buildings, and new commercial requirements will be added to ensure that land use pattern lends itself to providing more human-scale development that has interesting fabric at street level. Diversity of buildings and land uses will keep the village corridors interesting and inviting to pedestrians and local commercial development. And the recommendation is that staff be given authorization to hold a public information meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Debbie. I don't see anything about parking. So is there any, like with the 75% commercial, is that going to affect the parking a lot, like for the residentials? Like,
Through you, Mr. Chair, they would still have to meet our parking requirements. So we have a section with under the general provisions that talk about parking, and it's based, as I said, with each residential unit, you're required to have 1.5 parking stalls for anything over 6 residential units, and then you're required to have 1 parking stall for every 7 dwelling units for visitor parking. And then the commercial, it really depends on the type of commercial use. For example, a doctor's office or a dentist office, it's based on your, the number of patients you can see at one point in time, whereas a retail use would be different, whereas maybe a computer repair person would have a different requirement. So really, it depends on that commercial use. So they would have to be able to accommodate all of those parking spaces for all of those uses on the lot as well.
Yeah, but if we don't do anything about like the parking, it's gonna take, this motion is not gonna do any better on small lots like if you have a small lot, like 15,000 square feet, you're not gonna be able to do that commercial in the basement. If you're gonna have like lot of parking, because it's gonna take all the residential.
So you, Mr. Chair, if council would like staff to look at reducing the parking for the village core zones, we'd be happy to do that.
Well, I don't know about other councilors, but I think if we want to progress with that, we have to look at it. Look at Shubenacadie, they have no parking at all. You cannot do something in one area of the municipality and not do it in the other.
Just for clarification through you, Mr. Chair, Shubenacadie is actually a little different. Last year, I believe it was Rachel, she did a presentation and council adopted regulations to reduce the parking requirements in Shubenacadie because we have the shared parking area within Shubenacadie. So residents within that village core, if somebody's building like an apartment building and stuff like that, their parking requirements are reduced because there is that shared parking area.
I understand that, but my point is, if you don't do something about the commercial parking in the other areas, that's not gonna allow for 16 units on a small lot, like half an acre lot, right? So either we're gonna take away the commercial, or we're gonna do improvement with our parking, because both they won't fit on the same, like, I don't know if you guys get me, but that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as said, we're happy to look at the parking requirements and reduce them if that's what council wishes to do.
Anything else, Councilor?
Well, we gotta look at other jurisdiction, like in Halifax, like some places you have apartment, like 4-story apartment with commercial at the bottom with no parking. Like some places we have to be like in a village core is mostly should be a walking area. Like we have, I don't know. I'm probably looking something in the future, but I don't know.
Anything else, Councilor?
No, that's it for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff are getting some mixed messages here because over the last few years, council's also expressed frustration with not enough parking in some areas. With respect to village cores, though, I think the councilor has hit on something, and Debbie mentioned Shubenacadie and the shared parking there, which I think is a solution. And in the concepts, some of the concepts you've looked at for the 214, there's also the idea that maybe the municipality should be providing some central parking areas for these developing commercial areas. So that is something maybe that could be explored in the future as well. But the councilor's right. Most municipalities across the country are sort of trending in the direction of reducing parking requirements. We, because of some frustration in certain developments, have not moved in that direction.
Councilor, any comment? Or?
Yeah, like what I like to address to make everybody understand my point, like we're trying to increase capacity here. So if now you're allowed 12 units on one lot with the added commercial at the bottom, you probably won't be allowed to have 12 for the parking requirement. So we're reducing instead of increasing to 16. So if we, I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Just for clarification, the commercial provision would only be related to units between 13 and 16 dwelling units. With the increase in the residential, you'd have to have the commercial component at that point in time. You'd still be able to have up to 12 dwelling units without the commercial component, but it has to be commercial compatible. So like convertible to commercial. So that's what we have in our current design requirements, is that the first floor can be converted to commercial. You have the 10-foot ceilings, you have the front entrance facing the road, you have the larger windows on the
Yeah, but
front.
that didn't increase. That's what it was. That's what it's gonna be. So it's not. We didn't increase anything that way. That's what it is right now, right? The 12 unit with the
You could do,
commercial
you could,
component.
you could do 12 units as of right now, as long as it's commercial capable on the ground floor. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to have the commercial. But what we're proposing is to go up to 16 units as of right with a commercial component.
Yeah, but if you don't have it, you don't have it. Like, you're not doing anything to increase the residential without having
I'm
the
sorry, I
parking.
don't think I understand.
If you don't have enough parking for the commercial.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's already sites out there within East Hants that can't even accommodate the 12 units as of right because they're too small. So you're going to have that in every situation, that the village cores naturally have small lots. And that's why the minimum lot size on the village core is very small. If you look at it, and the frontage requirements on the village core is very small. You're not going to be able to get every type of building on every lot in the village course just because there are such small lots there. So some developers, you're right, they won't be able to do 16 units as of right. It's just going to be one of those things. They'll have to go with maybe 8 units as of right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Senator Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. So this 9th initiative, as you refer to it, is mandatory to receive the HAF funding. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, if we want the funding, we have to complete all 9 initiatives.
Okay. So when we talked about this back in the beginning, when we were approaching or when we were engaging in this, it seems to me like it's much more than what I anticipated. So when you talk about, I'm just going down, where's the numbers where it says how many square meters or how many square feet?
So it's second bullet there. Staff recommend maximum gross floor area to be 1,584 square meters
Yes.
from the 835.
So almost doubled just to, so in my zone, the Village Core Zone in Enfield, all I was thinking was the possibility of 4 more units if it was permitted. And that would be only in areas where they're able to do it, right? As you just said, some lots are small.
That's correct.
So it's areas that have the ability to have 4 more units on it. And that's what I was thinking. So this looks like that's almost double the square meters. That's to accommodate 4 extra units or to accommodate this commercial idea plus 4 extra units?
See you, Mr. Chair. Basically, we came up with the number. If a lot of developers, they want to do two bedroom apartment units. So a 2-bedroom apartment is usually about 800 square feet. So we looked at it, having 800 square feet apartments. But if we don't want to accommodate like 2-bedroom apartment units, you could lower that. If you're looking to allow, for example, 1-bedroom apartment units at 600 square feet each, then you could lower with some commercial component, and then you have to think about your corridors and your like where you have your services at, hot water, all that kind of stuff. You could lower it to 1,280, and that would allow for 16 1-bedroom apartments at 600 square feet each, with approximately 400 square meters of commercial area.
Okay. Well, when I think of Enfield, for anyone who's driven through lately, we have apartments galore already there. We've got way more than that in the queue or already been started. So we've got tons of apartments. I can see single-bedroom apartments being a lot more useful for the simple fact that they're going to be less expensive. And while we can't have when we don't seem to have any affordable housing in the area, at the very least, having single-bedroom apartments would mean that they're not going to be able to charge as much for them. I'm looking for the least that we have to do in order to get these funds. And increasing it from 835 meters to 1,584 meters is not what I was envisioning at all. As far as the parking goes, I think we'd be crazy to be reducing our parking on anything. I mean, The only thing we ever have is parking problems in my area anyway. And I know that everybody has different problems in different areas, but these are just the issues in my district where there happens to be village core zoning. That's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. This recommendation increases the height allowed, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So right now, in the village core zone, you can have 3 stories, but the 3rd story has to be built into the roof line, and the building has to be built at grade. So what this does, it does 3 stories where the 3rd story does not have to be built into the
So
roof
it
line, so you don't have to
increases-
do that mansard roof or the gamble roof or whatnot.
It increases the possible height.
Yes.
Okay, number 1. Number 2, I don't know, I was laboring under a misapprehension. I thought we had had discussions and changed at some point in time that the bottom floor had to be commercial, not just designed for commercial. Am I incorrect on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was done in the mixed-use center zone. You did 50% commercial on the ground floor, but it wasn't in the village cores. The village cores they used to be, when I first started, they used to have commercial on the ground floor, and then there was an application come forward where the applicant asked to have the regulations changed, and council went forward, and so that you didn't have to have commercial on the ground floor, it just had to be commercial capable. And then, so it's been that way since that application.
Personally, I still believe that if we want commercial in the ground floor, then we want commercial in the ground floor, period. We should say what we want, and that's what the regulations should say. I probably could be persuaded to the increase in size. We certainly have to increase the density somehow. I am not in favor of decreasing parking in any way. If I could get the support around the council table, we'd be revisiting increasing the parking necessary for all developments in this area of East Hants, because the lack of parking is causing grief, much, much, much grief. And the more we continue to allow development without adequate parking, the more grief we're visiting on ourselves. That continues to be my opinion. So this motion is simply to authorize a public information meeting to consider the proposal. Be interested to hear what questions they have when they come to the public information meeting. I'm willing to support going to a public information meeting. I'm not sure if you've got me on everything yet. Time will tell. So, thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Counselor Tingley.
Through the chair, and I'm also in favor of going to a public information meeting or hearing what the public have to say, so I'm going to recommend the motion. The Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting to consider the proposal to amend the East Hants official community plan to increase the density in the village core designation and zone.
So moved in second. On before the motion, Counselor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hearing a lot of the conversation here today, especially from the councilors that this area will affect the most. By moving from 12 to 16 units, I don't remember anywhere in those 9 requirements that it required us to make commercial requirements, moving from those 12 to 16 units. And from the sounds of things, moving from 12 to 16 units, putting a commercial requirement on adds stress to parking and adds stress to the size of the buildings. So I'll be interested to see, like, we'll go for public proposal, but I understand the desire for commercial requirements. I think commercial ready is a way to be, but if you look at, and and I've been driving through Enfield and Elmsdale quite a bit lately, a lot of the larger lots are gone, right? So there'll be a lot of smaller lots, which even if as of right was 1,500, there's no way they're going to fit with setbacks and everything else. So I just wonder if we're trying to beef this up more than it has to be. And my second thing is, out of the 9 requirements that we have, how many do we have complete so far?
I can take a look here, just give me 1 sec and I'll go through them. And just a note with the commercial, it's part of your economic and business development plan to have commercial space available for people that want to locate in East Hanson. I did talk to the economic and business staff, development staff about it, and Graham is here and he could probably tell you a little bit more about what the plan is if you're interested. But for the initiatives, I can go through that, sure. So accessory dwelling unit initiative, and that was to do the waiver of the building permit fees for that. So that's still ongoing. That's being done. The Lance North secondary plan, that's underway, and I believe we'll be getting a final report in that sometime this winter, early spring. The Shubenacadie Village Core parking plan, and so the regulations have been put in place, and now it's just getting the design of that parking area done. The Mount Uniacke secondary planning strategy, we're underway with that, and I just received the groundwater study today, so that will be coming forward to you in February with some more information. And the building inspection capacity improvements, part of that has been completed of updating the building permit process, and we are looking at, that's still underway, but it'll be completed. The implementation of a new e-permitting system for building and development permits. Our staff have been in contact with Town Suite people, and we're working on that solution as well. Permit fees review, that was done in 2024 and is now implemented. Municipal surplus land review, the portion that we had to do for the initiatives is now complete, and I believe that council will be dealing with that in the future as well. And the last one is the increased from the 12 units to 16 units as of right in the village core zone, and that had to start this month, so.
Okay. I do also seem to remember, for the Housing Accelerator Fund, there was a number of units that had to be constructed in so many years.
Yep.
And, you know, seeing how last year was a record year for building permits, I was wondering how we're tracking on hitting the targeted goal for that.
We're doing well, so by the end of it, we have to have 1,186 permitted housing units, and that's broken down into 702 missing middle housing, and that's like your semi-detached, accessory dwelling units, and apartment units in buildings 4 stories and lower. And then we have to have 7 other multi-unit residential housing, and that's your 5-story buildings. And we have that one 5-story building with 77 units, so we have that covered off. So I think we're doing pretty good. It's, 400 permits, dwelling units this year, I believe. So we have to account for ones that have been, there are a couple demolitions along the way, so we have to take those away, but I think we're doing well.
No, it's good, because I really think it situates the understanding how close we are so early in the process. And this is part of the process, is going from 12 to 16. And I'm just wondering if the 75% commercial space might be causing some of this extra parking strain. If it would be at 50% or you know, maybe 50% commercial, the other 50% commercial ready, but they could do it because the market's going to really drive what commercial needs to be there.
And through you, Mr. Chair, it's the commercial front, so it's the frontage of the building. It's not the whole footprint of the bottom floor. It's not 75% of the bottom floor. It's 75% of that frontage that's on the street. So just say, I don't know, if you had like a 3,000 square feet on the bottom floor, only 1,000 of that maybe you want to dedicate towards your commercial component. So it's really what's showing on that street frontage to activate that street frontage, because that's where people walk by and they get attracted to go into a building, and it feels like there's no blank walls there and such, so it feels more friendly and human scaled.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Debbie. It's been a good report, and there's been some good discussion and lots of things to think about. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Counselor. I'm going to go to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilors, I think I know I've heard John say 100 times, when you change something, you sort of wait and see what happens, and if you don't like what's happening, you change it to something else. And I think the change that Debbie's referring to that was probably, has had some unintended consequences when said developer, whoever it was, asked to remove that commercial requirement for your village core. Because your village cores are just that. They are supposed to be the areas where people from your residential communities come to do their shopping and do their, get their services and whatnot. And from what I've seen over the last probably 10 years, that has changed. Your commercial, your village cores are becoming residential neighborhoods, and that's not the intention of that village core. You can use the village core to have residential, but that purpose is for people to have a place to go to get services that are not within neighborhoods. And I think we're starting to see that trend. Yes, they're commercial capable, but you have to really ask the question, once you've got residential tenants in there, are they really going to switch that out to commercial? There's all kinds of things that would have to line up to make that happen, and I don't think we're going to see that happen in droves. So the commercial piece is in here because it's an opportunity, as you're changing and looking at that village core zone, to really think about what it is you want your communities to look like. And those village cores really shouldn't turn into residential neighborhoods. We need to keep some commercial component in there. Otherwise, you might as well zone them R1 and move on, or R3, or whatever would give you that density that, that you're going to get. So I just wanted to point that out. The report does, on page 2, speak to that, but I think it's that unintended consequences of some of the changes that have been made in the past that we're trying to right at this point. And I think that village core really does need some of that commercial component put in, otherwise you're going to have just purely residential, and there's going to be no room for those small service industries in East Hants in those village core areas. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councilor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. I understand about the commercial part because when I visualize village core in my district at least, I see what it looks like and what the intention is. So the commercial part of it doesn't bother me, except for the fact that it increases the potential size of it because you're still trying to get potential for 16 units on it. But as far as the commercial being in the bottom of that seems fitting for the zone that it is in now. As far as putting 16 units, I mean, if developers or people who are interested in building apartments had it their way, Enfield down the road, there would be no houses. It would be apartments from the bridge right up through the corridor. And it's our job to keep that from happening. But my issue with this, and I don't need a public hearing to know, is the increase from 835 meters to 1,584 meters. I can't support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a minute.
There is more than is necessary in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I forgot the most important thing for us. Is that like just for the serviced area, or it's going to affect Mount-Uniac too?
To you, Mr. Chair, it impacts all of the village core zone, so it would be Mount-Uniac as well.
Okay, so we're going to be able to do the same thing as here if you have the
Yeah.
approval? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. There's nobody left, so we'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed with Councillor Rhino and Councillor Garden-Cole voting nay. Next item on the agenda is bylaw P 800-2, an amendment to bylaw P 800, civic addressing bylaw, follow-up report, repeat first reading. And Louise, you can start when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is an update to the one presented in December 2024. The amended bylaw has been given first reading already, but following communication with the province as directed by motion C-24-445, staff are recommending additional amendments. There we go. As part of the 5-year review of the civic addressing bylaw, staff have reviewed Schedule A of the bylaw and have recommended amendments. Schedule A of the civic addressing bylaw contains general principles and guidelines for the civic addressing coordinator to determine what is an acceptable public street or private road name. Staff recommend amendments to Schedule A to provide additional criteria that would prevent an offensive or distasteful name from being approved, as well as guidelines that align Parks, Recreation, and Culture's parks naming policy. First reading of amended bylaw P-800 was given at the December meeting of Council. At the December 2024 meeting of Planning Advisory Committee, concern was expressed regarding Guideline A3 in Schedule A that restricts the use of special characters and punctuation in road names. Committee members were concerned that the guideline may prevent some French Acadian or Mi'kmaq names from being accepted. A motion C-24-445 was moved that directed staff to correspond with the province on Section A3 of the bylaw with regards to Mi'kmaq Acadian, as well as any other naming of provincial roads. Following that discussion with the province and further research, staff recommend giving first reading again, as there are additional proposed amendments relating to the use of special characters and appealing of a road name rejection. And these are the current Schedule A guidelines. No name shall be duplicated, including similar names that are differentiated by street type. No street name shall sound like an existing name. No street name shall contain numbers, special characters, decimals, hyphens, apostrophes, periods, or punctuations of any kind. No street name shall incorporate product, trademark, or copyright names, and street names should be limited to 24 characters. As previously discussed, there are no guidelines included in Schedule A that the name of a public street or private road should be inoffensive to the public. Without an amendment, there is no mechanism to reject a submitted name that may be considered to be inappropriate. Staff have not been in a position where a name that could be viewed as inappropriate has been submitted for consideration. The amendment is recommended in order to mitigate the possibility of such a situation. Staff recommend an additional guideline as well as an amendment to an existing guideline in Schedule A. The new guideline will not allow a public street or private road name to be a combination of a given name and surname without the consent of council. Following the discussion of special characters at PAC in December, staff also recommend the guideline A3 be amended to allow special characters and punctuation in public street and private road names at the discretion of the civic addressing coordinator. This new guideline and amendment of guideline A3 will align Schedule A with Parks, Recreation, and Culture's parks naming policy, sections 4.3 and 4.6. Staff have recognized that there is no process laid out in the civic addressing bylaw that would allow for an appeal of a rejected road name. Staff recommend a subsection be added to Section 7 of the civic addressing bylaw, which pertains to public street and private road naming. This new section will allow a written appeal to be submitted to council if a street name has been rejected by the civic addressing coordinator. And there are several approaches that municipalities take in regard to regulating the naming of public streets and private roads. In some policies, there's no requirement that the proposed street name be in good taste or free of offensive language. The provincial road naming policy, as well as Pictou County and Antigonish County's naming policies, include the guideline that a submitted name must be in good taste. The municipality of the District of Yarmouth street naming policy includes the guideline not to be offensive to the public and or pose a safety concern. And the Town of Niagara-on-the-Lake's policy section of their road naming policy, names to avoid, has pretty detailed criteria, names that could be construed as advertising a particular business, and cumbersome, corrupted, modified names, discriminatory, derogatory names from the point of view of race, sex, color, creed, political affiliation, or other social factors, and names with any sexual overtones, inappropriate humor, parody, slang, or double meaning, and names that have a secondary negative or offensive connotation. Staff recommend an amendment to the bylaw that falls between the guideline for a name to be simply in good taste and the detail of Niagara on the Lakes policy would be appropriate. Section 4.2 of the provincial road naming policy addresses the use of special characters. The section reads, names submitted with special characters, example, a hyphen, genitive apostrophe, etc., will be accepted only if the special characters are found in a subset of the extended ASCII character set. This subset does not include stylized symbols such as the pound symbol, percent symbol, etc. Staff have communicated with the Department of Public Works regarding this policy. Public Works staff have indicated they review road names with special characters on a case-by-case basis. In some systems, such as databases or mapping software, special characters may not be compatible and will restrict functionality. The department recommends using road names without special characters for this reason. The department has made allowances for some road names and have no record of rejecting a name due to a special character. The Parks, Recreation, and Culture's Parks Naming Policy also has a section regarding the use of special characters and of given names and surnames for use as park names. Section 4.3 of the Parks Naming Policy mirrors Section A3 of Schedule A. It includes an additional statement recognizing that restricting the use of special characters and punctuation precludes the use of many Mi'kmaq names. The Parks Naming Policy also allows the use of special characters at the discretion of Parks, Recreation, and Culture staff. Where the Department of Public Works reviews road names with special characters on a case-by-case basis and are therefore approved at the discretion of department staff as well, municipal staff recommend language that borrows from the provincial road naming policy. And these are the proposed amendments. A6 and A7 they don't differ from the previous amendment. No street name shall be discriminatory, derogatory, or have a negative or offensive connotation. And no street name shall be a personal name, such as a combination of a given name and surname without the consent of council. And we've added onto Section A3, special characters and/or punctuation found in a subset of the extended ASCII character set may be accepted at the discretion of the civic addressing coordinator. We've also noted a numbering error in Section 8.1.c where it should reference 8.1.b. And the proposed subsection 7.8 reads, where the civic addressing coordinator has rejected a street name, a written appeal may be submitted to the municipal clerk within 7 days of the rejection. The appellant will then be given notice of the date and time of when the appeal will be heard by council. And the alternative option, excuse me, if Planning Advisory Committee does not support the additional changes outlined in this report, which include the use of special characters and the appealing of a rejected road name, the original version of the amended bylaw, which was given first reading in December, will be added to the council agenda this month to be considered for second reading. In conclusion, the staff proposed amendments to Schedule A of the civic addressing bylaw. The amendments will provide additional criteria for the civic addressing coordinator in determining whether to accept or reject a proposed public street or private road name, and to prevent an offensive name from being approved. The amendment will also align civic addressing bylaws naming guidelines with Parks, Recreation, and Culture's guidelines for naming public parks in relation to the use of special characters as well as given names and surnames. Staff also proposed a housekeeping amendment to Section 8.1.c and an amendment regarding the appeal of a rejected street name. Due to the changes relating to the use of special characters, staff are recommending first reading be given again to the amendments of the civic addressing bylaw. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Louise. Warden Rolston.
I would move that Planning Advisory Committee recommend to council that council give first reading to bylaw P-800-2, a bylaw to amend bylaw P-800, civic addressing bylaw.
So moved and second. Oops. Who I wanted to speak is left, so I'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is single access and 100 lot option report, vulnerability assessment results, and Director Woodford, you can begin when you're ready.
I'll slide over here.
Oh, that's okay.
That's okay.
All right. Musical chairs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is an issue council's discussed a few times, actually, over the last year or so, regarding areas vulnerable as a result of only having one access. And there were a number of motions that were passed, again, really since the fires in the spring of 2023. And the last one moved that council authorize staff to create lot access regulations based on the length of road, number of lots, and number of dwelling units. And so in looking at what others do, East Hants, it turns out, is one of the few municipalities in Nova Scotia that limit the number of lots created on a single access. Some of the municipalities reviewed have limits on the length of a new street, but developers can get around the street length requirement by showing a phased subdivision, but not building all the roads shown on the plan. East Hants does require road reserves at a maximum of every 475 meters where there are municipal services and every 800 meters where there are no services. Then just some other communities here. So in West Hants, there are no limits on number of lots on a single access. For larger scale developments, the municipality would rely on a traffic study. In Colchester and Lunenburg, there are no limits on single access. In Halifax, they have design guidelines where a second access is impractical. Up to 100 lots containing a maximum of 100 dwelling units may be approved with a single access. Further to 100 lots in Halifax, where there is an approved phasing plan and subdivision agreement in place, confirming that a second street access will be provided within a specified time, approved by the municipal engineer. Up to 300 lots containing a maximum of 300 dwelling units may be approved prior to the second access being provided. And in Moncton, the maximum length of a dead-end street is 180 meters, and any street beyond that must have a second access. A dead-end street is only permitted in unique circumstances. And it looks like they involve their fire department more, so the Moncton Fire Department reviews plans of subdivision, and the maximum number of dwelling units on one access depends on comments from the fire department. And depending on the number of dwelling units, the fire department may want to see an additional street intersection. So research on the topic of single access roads was completed, and there is not any science-based method of determining an appropriate road length or dwelling count. Most discussion boards where planners discuss the issue indicated that their regulations are based on what a fire department can service and respond to, and also on the amount of risk that a municipality is willing to accept. In Los Angeles, the municipal code requires that when a dead-end access is permitted, that requires special permission in excess of 700 feet from the nearest cross street. At least one additional ingress or egress roadway shall be provided in such a manner that an alternative means of egress is accomplished. And that can be accomplished, that can be completed through the use of fire lanes. LA also has many other code requirements related to fire prevention, such as requiring a fire lane if the first floor wall is more than 150 feet from the property line. And I suspect a lot of what we saw over the last couple of weeks in LA are in developments that were done prior to these regulations, so where you had one long road that went up a canyon. Other jurisdictions in the U.S. have alternative regulations, and there is no consistent set of regulations for dead-end streets. For example, in Delaware, you can't have more than 20 single-family homes on a dead-end street, and the maximum length is between 500 and 1,000 feet. A bit of background in terms of where our 100-lot rule came from, and it really came from the development when Lillian and Vernon Courts were developed as an extension of Elmwood Drive. We had no regulations at the time that prevented that from happening. There was a lot of concern because, of course, there's a lumber mill here, and you have 328 dwelling units all on that one access. As a result, council had us look at it, and the number 100 was selected for no particular reason. And that's been around since, I think, 2006. So planning, GIS, and EMO staff have completed the vulnerability assessment on each neighborhood with 100 lots and a single access to help identify vulnerabilities in each area. And detailed vulnerability assessments have been attached to the staff report. Items that were taken into consideration as part of the analysis include access, road ownership, the length of the road, the type of forest cover, turns out that, and I guess stuff I hadn't thought of before, things like a coniferous forest burns a lot hotter and faster than a deciduous one. And also slope. Again, something I hadn't thought of previously, but it makes sense that, you know, if you're upslope of a fire, there's more, the fire is going to move faster and you're going to experience more heat. Whereas a more moderate slope or flat areas, you're not going to have that same effect. In addition to fire risk, we also took into consideration water courses and determined how many water courses intersect roads within a single access area. Obviously, if there's a potential for a flood event, subdivision could also be cut off for that reason. And then fire protection, looked at whether there are fire hydrants or at least dry hydrant, and if there's water nearby for access for the fire department. And then also the total number of impacted residents came into the equation. So, and I have to hand it to Debbie and Tippy for the great work they did on the vulnerability assessment. There's a lot of interesting research here. And I was surprised, actually, and always disappointed when we do stuff like this, that we couldn't find another municipality that's done this kind of work. So that's some interesting work they came up with, and I'm going to let Debbie take us through that assessment.
All right, thank you, John. So as John mentioned, we did a vulnerability assessment. So we took each of those subdivisions that have 100 lots or more and a single access into them and reviewed them to determine what we should be looking at and what are the vulnerabilities in each of these areas. So as John mentioned, these are the elements of the vulnerability assessment. He went through some of those already. In addition to that, we looked at the geography. We calculated the number of roads. This is Elmwood subdivision here. The number of roads in the development, whether they were in public ownership or whether they were in private ownership, whether they were dirt roads or paved roads. We looked at the number of lots, the total number of dwelling units, and we did an approximate potential population in each development. We also looked at the type of housing. So is the housing single unit dwellings, seasonal dwellings, semi-detached, where there are different types of dwelling units in the development, large lots of developments. We also took into consideration infrastructure and amenities. So we own quite a few open space parcels across the municipality, and some of these are located in these single access developments. For example, we have Elmwood Park in the Elmwood subdivision. And then we took into consideration what has happened in the past. So we know in some of these situations that there has been road washouts, that floodplains are adjacent, that there, for example, in the situation of Elmwood subdivision, that there is a mill adjacent to the development, which could cut off access. And then for each of these vulnerability assessments, we gave them a score out of 5. So with less vulnerable being 1 and the most vulnerable being number 5. And then we rated all of them. And this is just a look at the mapping that our GIS coordinator, Tippy, did for us. So she used provincial data and then put that into land cover analysis, risk analysis, from very low to very high. And as John mentioned, the softwood and brush burns hotter and faster than, for example, hardwood. And then she also did the same thing, taking provincial data. We looked at the slope in each of these developments and looked at the direction and flow of the water courses and how many water courses intersected with the roads within that development. And we did these for, as I said, all of the subdivisions that have 100 lots or more, and then they also have the single access. There are other developments within East Hants or other areas within East Hants that may have single access but don't have 100 lots yet that we could look at in the future, or that have maybe 2 accesses but have over 100 lots that could be looked at too, because it could have vulnerability issues. But that's for another time. So we did that. And then once we worked together and looked at these vulnerabilities and created a vulnerability assessment, we went back and we wanted to weight the vulnerabilities so that we could mark them out of 100 and determine how they ranked out of 100. And John will go on and talk about that weighting process a little bit more.
Okay. So it could be further refined, the work that's been done here for EMO purposes or for climate change planning by adding additional criteria such as communications, distance from first responders, and so on. And the assessment has shown that all of the neighborhoods identified with over 100 lots and one access are at some risk to fire or flooding and would impact residents' ability to exit their neighborhood in case of emergency. And the assessment is divided into those 5 categories. Debbie mentioned every 20% increase is attributed to a different level of vulnerability. So 0 to 20, very low, 21 to 40, low, 41 to 60, moderate, 61 to 80, high, and 81 to 100, very high. And so this is the ones that we ranked. These are how they came out. And I should mention that the way we did this, these were scored internally by 3 different staff. So there was Tippy, myself, and Calvin. So we had the GIS perspective, the planning perspective, and the EMO perspective. And those numbers were then amalgamated. As it turns out, I think we scored them all pretty close anyway, but just so that there was more perspective there. So as you can see, Uniacke Mines Road came out at 79, Piggott Lake at 75, as well as Grand Lake. Old Mines 72, Lake Crest 67, Elmwood at 55. So that was the only one that would be in that moderate category. And then just as a comparison to see what low would look like, we also looked at Cali Lane, which came out at 36%. And again, although Cali Lane doesn't have 100 lots, the area was included to show an example, and also because there is developable land on that street, and we think, eventually it will get to that limit. And of the neighborhoods with over 100 lots, all of the areas reviewed have a moderate to high vulnerability, with, as I mentioned, Uniacke Mines having the highest. And there are likely other areas in East Hants that would have a high vulnerability assessment score, although they have 2 ways to access a neighborhood. And council at some future point may want to complete a vulnerability assessment for other neighborhoods in East Hants. And of course, staff can't predict if and when a major event will happen. All we can do is look at the vulnerabilities that will lead to a major event. And it is council's decision to determine what risk is acceptable to the community and for the municipality. So staff are not recommending continued development in areas with one access if the vulnerability is high to extreme. In the options section, options have been developed based on a recommendation for PAC's consideration. So back in July 23, council passed a motion to limit the number of dwelling units to 100 units on a single access as part of development agreement negotiations. And this motion does not apply to as of right development. So if the lots are already created, houses can still be built, or new subdivisions, that's as of right. And staff recommend that a consistent approach be taken. As shown by Cali Lane, a larger number of dwelling units can be located on a single axis if the road is relatively short, the road is serviced by fire hydrants, and the surrounding area is developed, so you don't have as much forest cover. Therefore, staff recommend that on roads 750 meters in length or shorter, up to 300 dwelling units may be permitted on a single access, where there are municipal water and wastewater services. In areas outside of a serviceable growth management area, staff recommend that the maximum number of dwelling units located on a single access be 150. And that 50% additional dwelling units is really so that half of the single unit dwellings or homeowners in the future could get accessory dwelling units, because right now on those streets that are over the 100 limit, you can't add an accessory dwelling unit. Also, as part of the second access report presented to PAC in a year ago, on January 24, staff completed a desktop exercise and identified potential emergency access points that could be created. One of the options identified in the report was to direct staff to further investigate these potential connections. However, the council at the time chose not to move forward. So if after reviewing the vulnerability assessment, PAC wishes to now investigate options to creating a second access into identified neighborhoods, PAC may want to direct staff to, or recommend that staff investigate potential developments of emergency accesses to service the identified single access areas, and to allow for the continued development of these areas. And I think the discussion last year revolved around a lot. This would take a fair bit of staff resources, engineering and finance. So I guess unless it's something a road you're willing to go down, then pardon the pun, then, I wouldn't recommend a motion to that effect. So the options, again, staff don't recommend that the number of lots on the roads reviewed, except Kelly Lane, be permitted to increase without a second access. And based on staff evaluation, the risk to the residents seems to outweigh the benefits to increasing the housing supply. Municipal staff have developed 4 options for the consideration of PAC. And the first is to prepare amendments to the subdivision bylaw that would permit over 100 lots on a single access road where an assessment shows that the road has a very low to moderate risk assessment, and prepare amendments to the planning documents that permit up to 300 dwelling units on a single access road in a growth management area serviced by municipal water and wastewater, and prepare amendments that would permit a maximum of 150 dwelling units on a single access in all areas of East Hants not serviced by municipal water and wastewater. Option 2 would be to maintain the 100-lot regulation and prepare an amendment that would limit the number of dwelling units to 300 units on a single access in growth management areas and 150 dwelling units in all areas of East Hants not serviced by water and wastewater. And number 3, direct staff to, again, investigate the feasibility of constructing emergency accesses to service the areas identified in this report to allow for increased development. And those accesses could be built and owned by East Hants or built to the East Hants private road standard with easements in favor of all impacted properties. Or option 4, make no changes to the current regulations and allow for the development community to build second accesses to the identified areas when development pressure warrants the cost of constructing the second access. In terms of engagement, the proposed amendments would require a public information meeting. So if council authorizes staff to prepare amendments to the official community plan in accordance with the recommended motion, a public information meeting would be organized and held here in Elmsdale. And notice of the public information meeting will be advertised on our website and social media. In addition, staff will notify local surveyors, developers, and road associations of any such meeting. So the recommendation is to prepare amendments based on option 1 and authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, staff. Warden Rolson would like to speak.
Thank you. I'm not going to move the recommended motion because I don't like it. We started down this road after the fires in our neighboring municipality of HRM and seeing what happened there. And I can still see those pictures in my mind of those cars trying to get out of there. So when we started down this road, it was to see what perhaps we should do in our municipality to protect people and to make it possible for them to get safely out of fire areas if there were a fire. And I understand that there's nothing that we can do that can guarantee that, but I felt that we were moving towards doing better than what we had done, and this does not, in my opinion, do that. It, instead of making things better, it increases the number that we can build on these single access roads by 50%. And so I can't live with that. I will not vote for that. I will not have it on my conscience that I supported something that I felt put people in danger should anything ever happen. Jurisdictional scans are great. I'm not sure we have a lot in common with Los Angeles. However, one thing that we do have in common with Los Angeles and certain parts of this municipality is the availability of central services, water and sewer. It hasn't done Los Angeles a whole heck of a lot of good. Because just because you have water available, depending on where the fire is, if you lose power to or lose that station, that pumping station or whatever, you're not going to have that water available. So I just am deeply disappointed that we're going backwards instead of forwards. Of all the options presented here, option 4 is the best of the lot, in my opinion. However, I expect that I won't carry the day here. I still, council made a decision, and it was council's decision, and I stood behind it, but I still do not understand the decision that this council made to not extend a road which would have provided a secondary access to one subdivision community in this municipality on land that we already owned. I fail to understand how the complaints of a few residents trumped the safety of others. I do not understand that. And I will refrain from moving option 4 since I'm the first on to speak. Others have a right to speak. I don't want to cut them off, but I will not be supporting the recommended motion should it be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councilor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, it was a very detailed report. The appendixes were very interesting to see the work that was done by the GIS sections and everything else, and I don't dispute anything with the vulnerability scores. The biggest thing, as you know, 3 of the top 5 are in my district, or 3 of the top 4, sorry, are in my district, is right now there's the inability to create new roads in that area. So we know there's an issue, but our planning does not allow anybody to build new roads in that area. So how do you fix a problem if you can't build a new road? So this is something that we've talked about, and there is actually one area that was missed in this study that is huge, is the South Uniacke Road.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, the South Uniacke Road wasn't included because it didn't have over 100 lots. So technically, you can still continue to develop on it because there's no limit, because the mobile home park is one parcel of land, and although it has like multiple dwelling units on it, it still only counts for one parcel. And that's why I said when we do, if we were to do further vulnerability analysis, that would be one of the ones I would choose. Country River Estates would be another one I'd choose.
And the reason I said South Uniacke is they have a very old bridge that is in disrepair, that has flooding issues on top of any of the fire risk and everything else. So that's another area that, again, the backside of that, the only way to make connections, all those properties are not allowed to build roads on. They're basically locked out due to our regulations. So if we really want to take a stab at making things better and safer, we need to enable roads to be built in areas that need roads. In some of these cases, they're like Pickett Lake Road. There was a development that tried to link into it, which would have provided a second exit years ago, and it was turned down, right? Lake Crest that connects to Joffrey, there is a right-of-way that goes between Joffrey and the Beamish Road. But the Beamish Road's a provincial road that links right into the Uniacke Mines Road, which would go right into south, which would go right from East Uniacke all the way into the main part of Mount Uniacke, rolls by the quarry. There is accesses there, but of course the province hasn't maintained that road for an eon, and I'm sure they give it to us for nothing because it's a long place and it'd be an awful lot of money to fix up. So the biggest thing is going along with this is we need to figure out ways to make it attractive for connections to happen by industry, instead of having barriers that stop it in high-risk areas. So that is something that I feel as we move forward in any way, we'll have to come back and review at some time as why can't, if somebody owns a piece of parcel and it abuts up to a road, can't they build another road that connects between the two, whether it be a private road or not? And if it's in the MGA, if it's providing that secondary access, does it need to be paved? Does it need to be and it's going to remain a private road, not a public road, as long as it's built to a private road standards, which I also think we need to look at. That's another discussion as well. But we really need to look at enabling people rather than hemming people in, because there is a lot of development that can happen. But we also we have a duty to make sure it's safe, and also inform people that are moving to an area, like With what's happened in the world in the last 5 or 10 years, people who are buying houses should also look at where they're going and what's available. So when I look at these options, I don't really see an option that speaks to me at the moment. So I'll listen to the rest of my fellow council before I make my decision. But I do want to say that the appendixes and the report is very detailed. However, some of those items that I highlighted weren't asked to be part of this report. I get that, but they are a barrier to reducing some of the things in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Musa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my fellow councilor hit all the roads and all the item I want to talk about. But I remember a few months ago, we had a letter from the MLA of the area to allow one-off. And I think what we should do is, because all those roads we're talking about, they have provincial component, like provincial road going by, but is deserted by the government, by the province, and is not maintained. So if they really want development, they should bring those roads at least to drivable condition to be able to be used as like emergency exit. Like you're talking about Grand Lake, the Renfrew Road, like could be one of the accesses, right? But it's not in our ability to maintain those roads. And I think we should involve our provincial counterpart in a solution. If we don't do that, kiss goodbye all Montuniac developments. Like you're not gonna have, like as our budget show, is our biggest assessment coming, new assessment coming from this area. It's gonna be shut down. Like you get 4 or 5 major development. They're gonna be stopped with the 100 lots. So I don't know if we can afford that. If those assessments stop coming from there, our budget next year is going to be so high. A lot of people are going to be mad, but that's a reality. So I think we should approach the province and see if they could do something about those, whatever, J-class, K-class, what you call them, Eldon? K? About the K-class road, and that could be a solution. Like, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some comments here. The report, I think, is well done. Being in the fire service for 45 years, you take a little respect for the potential what could happen. I think we have to look at, as a council, as to what we can do to some of these areas. I know Kelvin sits here. There is a program through the provincial government called Fire Smart for communities. I think that's something that we have to seriously look at and support the provincial government on that. A lot of the concern there is, would be to help existing roads, but for future developments, maybe be looking at the types of roads, wider roads, maybe. I mean, right away for road is normally 66 feet for the province. That might be something option. And the type of clearing for these future developments. Bigger lots with no trees in the background, so try to make your own home safer. And John in his report mentioned dry hydrants. There's a lot of these areas we're looking at do not have water, but we can actually put in a dry hydrant that would hold thousands of gallons of water. And after a major fire, Halifax has these, by the way, after a major fire, would be able to refill them for future use. I'd love to see the development, Horn Settlement area and stuff like that, but I have an issue with the fire potential, the wind hazards and stuff like that. The longest fire I've been to was 17 days, and that was non-residential. That's just stuff burning out there. A fire in Grand Lake area could kill people, die. So I think it's something we have to seriously look at before we make major decisions, the safety of our residents and the safety of our rescue first responders. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarification for Councillor Dixon, the Fire Smart program, we actually did address that last year when you weren't on council, and it was sent to our EMO committee, and the EMO committee selected the neighborhoods, and that was sent to the province to have this Fire Smart program potentially done for 3 of the subdivisions. And because Kara McCurdy actually went to Halifax, they got her, it hasn't been as fast to pick up, but Calvin might be able to give you an update on that.
I did meet with Arrowhead subdivision on Sunday, and they came up with discussion. Carla did the survey. They have not seen a reply on it, and I was going to hopefully contact my friend Calvin to see if we can get a copy of that and at least tell the people what we're trying to do before something happens. I mean, Arrowhead Park, I know the Enfield Fire Department, I've asked them in the spring to take a drive through, being able to get on the roads, accessibility. So there's driveways there. When I campaigned, you couldn't turn a fire truck in. So these are some things we have to look at. I know we want to develop, but we got to be safe first. That's all I have there, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this report. It's lengthy, and I know a lot of time was put into it for a subject that we don't really have a solution for. When we came up with this, it was shortly after, or it was fresh in our memory about what happened in Hammonds Plains. And I feel like when we came up with it, we were kind of, at least me, and I feel like the conversation was kind of around subdivisions. Just because we had, you know, the proposal of the subdivision up by across from Robert Scott going in, and we just kind of, when we talked about it, for myself, I was kind of, you know, visualizing subdivisions where houses were very close together and needing an exit, and that's kind of the way it was in the hardest hit area down in Hammonds Plains. I mean, a person has no way of knowing, you know, after something like that happens, you can say, well, I should have done this and I should have done that. Obviously, a second entrance might not have stopped as many houses from burning, but it would have had people, you know, helped people to safely exit quicker. I never visualized really bigger roads, more major roads or provincial roads, say Renfrew and that kind of road when I thought of this. So that's just something that I've had to get my head around since then. I don't see any option here that I'm in favor of 100%. I like the idea of doing assessments on roads and deciding which ones, you know, have a low to moderate risk, and maybe we could make decisions based on that. Yeah, that's really all I have on it. I just, those are just some observations of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tingley.
Similar comments through the chair as others, I guess. I appreciate the report. And my understanding is staff themselves identified the fire risk vulnerability assessment criteria. My concern is I really don't understand the risk myself, and I don't understand if this criteria is adequate or not. There's talk about Kara McCurdy conducting her study in Tintagel in 2016, and then after seeing what happened there, you know, I understand some of the measures weren't followed. So I really don't understand what the risk is. And Councillor Dixon mentioned Arrowhead Park. I don't think that's on this list as a high-risk area. I don't know if it is or not. My gut feeling is that it could be. My concern is I just don't understand the risk. I'm not sure how many people or houses or lots should be on one road type of thing, but I don't get a warm, cozy feeling of understanding what our risk is. Therefore, what's the next step? What should we do? I don't know if the province through DNR can assist with this, or but I'd like to understand the risks better.
To you, Mr. Chair. So what staff did is that we didn't evaluate the risk. What we did is evaluated the vulnerability of each neighborhood. And to evaluate risk like that, you need something beyond what DNR, I think, can offer you. We've spoken to DNR, and really they're looking at the Fire Smart program from a landscape perspective and stuff like that. If you want to know the associated risk that you're looking at, you probably need some sort of risk manager or something like that that will understand how to calculate risk. There is no magical number of how many dwelling units on a road. We tried to find it, and there's no calculation that tells you that. So what we did is we just went through, identified all the vulnerabilities that each community had, and tried to lay that out in a manner that was easy, that was accessible for everyone to understand. So length of road, type of roads, type of forest cover around. So when it comes to risk, it's really up to council to look at those assessments and determine, based on the vulnerabilities that we've determined, if it's a high vulnerability or a lower vulnerability, what's your acceptable risk. And if you're not comfortable with it, I'm not quite sure where to go from there, I guess.
Well, I'm trying to get the distinction between vulnerability and risk as well. Like, if you have a massive, how can you assess the vulnerability if you don't know what the risk is?
So, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll take a stab at that one. So, yeah, we've identified the vulnerabilities that, the science tells us are things that lead to forest fire, but we don't know what the frequency is going to be or the severity when those things happen. So we can't make that jump from vulnerability to risk. It's very hard. And we looked at a lot of documents, a lot of other jurisdictions. One that was quite interesting, Missoula, Montana, I think it was. They seem to have done the most work in this area. But even there, they've done this kind of a vulnerability analysis, and they have a pretty robust EMO plan, but they've never translated it into any sort of land use regulation. They don't restrict development, even though they say nobody should build on a steep slope in this area because it's a very high vulnerability due to the type of brush and the slope and the dry climate. So that would be a huge challenge for us to then leap to, go beyond identifying these vulnerabilities to determining a risk, because a risk you need to know frequency and severity.
Right, but in the case of Tantalum, for instance, they had never had a fire like that before. And somebody has expertise in it, goes in there, does that report and says you are a high to extreme risk, one of the several areas in the province, and then we see what happens. So even though there is no history of it happening, it is possible to identify whether it's a high or extreme. Like if you have something that's a low risk, that I think you're going to deal with that differently than you're going to deal with something that's an extreme risk. That's how I look at it. But your
Is that all,
points are taken.
Counselor?
Yep, that's it.
Thank you. Councilor Rhino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I've been around here a long time, the warden and I. Probably some of you may think we've been around when council was created, but we weren't. We were around when these 100 lots were created, right? And my thought at the time, it all surrounded Elmwood subdivision with the only one access and those two other streets or whatever building on it. That's how it was created, with no thought given to provincial roads, i.e., let's say down Renfrew Road or toward Grand Lake, no thought of that. In my mind, I don't think we even had a jurisdiction in that. My thinking is if you wanted to put a subdivision off there, that way, then it could only be up to 100 lots, right? That was my thinking. There was no, at the time, there was no Hammond's Plains. There was no Los Angeles, right? These events didn't even happen yet, right? So to me, at the time, it is 100 lots of a man-made subdivision, bang, 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 bang with your lots. But to me, it would have nothing to do with provincial roads. I understand the safety aspect of everybody across St. Simons Plains. But I also heard Councillor Dixon, talk about in areas such as that, dry hydrants. Now, our fire department in our area that I belong to, we take a proactive approach and we look at our response times in some areas, and then we try to go out and create dry hydrants. I mean, I don't want to restrict growth in other areas. That's not what we're here for. But a specific one subdivision on a certain lot shouldn't be over 100 lots, houses or whatever for one access. But how can we regulate coming off onto a provincial road? This is what my question is. If we want to protect those people and not hinder development, could we pursue the dry hydrant and maybe with a cost-sharing basis with the province on creating more dry hydrants in some areas to up the protection? That's where I'm leaning right now, and I enjoy the conversation going around the table that everybody's having. But that's why the warden and I were here, and that's why it was created, was to protect that. Because I think at the time there was very close to some, I can't pinpoint, but there was something happened around that area that could have been much worse than what it was, and that's why it was created. And she can correct me if I'm wrong, but. That was my point. We didn't want to hinder development in any other area at all. It was just the man-made subdivisions is what we were looking at. Like I say, I see the protection. I see that everybody on roads should be protected. So maybe we should, take a bigger look and, take a look at such as dry hydrants, more dry hydrants, and helping everybody out. Because there's got to be something there. But I do believe in a man-made subdivision, 100 lots. And if we were going to build off, another one off the number 2, 100 lots, and then you have to have 2 exits. That's my thinking. So that's what I have to say right now.
So, Mr. Chair, I mean, you could change your regulations to permit subdivisions to grow to 100 lots before they access a provincial road, whether there's one way in or not. Staff aren't recommending that, but again, what is your tolerance for risk is the question. And so, for example, the Monte Vista area, if you sort of implemented a rule like that, you could continue to grow off of that road.
Just a minute.
A rebuttal? I guess it's not a rebuttal. It's when that was created, 100 lots, we have evolved and we have gotten better in the fire service. More things have come to our attention. We've been putting in more proactive duties there. That things aren't quite like they were, and we've learned from each disaster. And usually disasters are 1 in 100, 1 in 50. And I'm not saying that's the case for everyone. But when you took up major things like that, we may not ever have a fire like that, and we may have one this summer. Who knows, right? But all we can do is try to mitigate those problems while not trying to stifle growth as in the Mount Uniacke or any area that way, as long as it fits with what we feel what the community would accept and out there. So those are just a couple of my thoughts anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. Just another comment here. We talk about the Halifax fire. I think a lot of people forget about the biggest fire in Nova Scotia last year was down in Island, Barrington Passage, up through Liverpool, which was 3 or 4 times the size of Halifax. A lot more homes, a lot more cottages and cabins destroyed. Totally volunteer firefighters. I spent a couple hours with Dwayne Hunt, who was their EMO guy, and we're talking about the fires. He went home one night at 6 o'clock, and they said the fire may not jump till the next afternoon. At 12 o'clock, he was back on the call because the fire jumped. Like, we got to realize fire creates its own wind, creates more hazards, so we got to be extra safe when we make these decisions in the interest of our people. It's yours.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perry.
Thank you. I'm glad Councilor Dixon brought up the fire on the South Shore as well, and both those fires were started by people, right? They weren't an act of God, they weren't an act of climate, they were started by people. In the case of Tantalon, they only had one exit. It was a hectic things, no deaths. Nobody died, right? I don't believe there was any loss of life in Shelburne County as well. Lots of people lost their livelihoods in their woodlots, their fishing boats and everything. So stuff can always be replaced. I believe in some cases we might have got lucky that nobody lost their lives, considering what's happened in other parts of the country, Fort Mac and so forth. But by us looking at this, I think it shows the public that we're concerned with safety. But I just don't want us to be making wholesale things based on 2 events that had 0 fatalities. They could have, but the plane that crashed at the airport last week with 1 landing gear could have resulted in massive fatalities, but it didn't, right? Could have, would have, should have is always going to be out there. I think it's great that this was worded as vulnerability. Nothing to do with risk. Vulnerability, right? Vulnerability and risk have 2 different meanings, and that's what we have to look at. The idea that, you know, this is good for here, a provincial road is different. Some of the, like, the Old Mines Road is a provincial road, right? Listed on here. Leads into other provincial roads, that leads into municipal roads. It shouldn't matter. If we're gonna restrict things, it doesn't matter what the road is classified as, provincial, municipal, or private, right? So are we only gonna say we're only gonna target municipal and private roads and leave provincial out? Well, I'm sorry, there's a lot of developers and a lot of people who want to build homes and accessory dwellings for their family that might live on a private road. And now why should somebody, because they live on a provincial road, be allowed to build an accessory dwelling in their backyard, even though they're over the limit, and somebody on a private road not be able to? So it's got to be blanket for everything or nothing for everybody. So the trying to determine whether it accesses a provincial road or not shouldn't be the thing, because the vulnerability for the people who live along that road is what we're looking at here. It has nothing to do with what the classification and who owns the road. It's about the vulnerability. So if we're going to be fair and we're going to be looking after everybody, we have to look after everybody the same. And you know, access to water in some of these cases is immediate, right there. There's lakes. There's everything else. Road sizes, I talked about before, right? I don't think we should have a private road standard and a municipal standard. There should be one road, which we would then lead to, like Councillor Dixon says, road width, right? Which provides a break and different things like this. So I can't move any of the recommended motions right now. I think this report is a good starting point, but I think there needs to be further discussion on this moving forward. And I don't know if we're going to get any further to a resolution on this today. And maybe I'm going to make a motion to table to come back for further discussion.
No motion yet.
Yeah, I'm making a motion to table this report for discussion.
I'll second it.
Does
For
that,
clarification, is there debate on a motion to table when it's not to table a motion?
I do believe you can table the report.
It's just using the same word, but you're not actually
Is there discussion on his motion allowed?
so we can continue?
There's a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. So anyone who's on before the motion can continue. Discussion on the motion on the floor should be the priority after that.
So discussion can continue? Just a minute, I'll bring you on. Go ahead, CEO.
My understanding would be that there's a motion on the floor that's been seconded. So conversation should be restricted to the motion on the floor, except where someone was on before the motion was made, to continue questioning staff on the report that has been presented.
I move to table this report for further discussion at a later date.
There was no his motion is on the floor. His motion is now on the floor. His motion is now on the floor. There was no previous motion.
Vote on the motion?
No. We've got to go to those of us who were waiting first. Because we were on before the motion.
But as the chair, I wanted to speak after everybody was finished. Can I still do that or no? If I give you the chairship?
You're the chair.
Okay. We'll continue. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. We've gone way over time on this. I don't disagree that it warrants further discussion at a later time. However, the thing for me in all this discussion that trumps everything is safety. Safety of people. I don't care what kind of a road they live on. It's safety for them. It's safety for the first responders. And you can have all the lakes and all the dry hydrants that you want wherever you want them. But you have to get a fire truck and a pump and all that stuff to that water source to fight a fire. And then you have to be able to get it back out of there to get first responders to safety. And we can go round and round and round about not wanting to stifle development. And, you know, I'm all for development when it can be done safely. But there comes a time for me that safety trumps development and trumps dollars. And this is one of those times. No, we don't know if there'll ever be a fire, but we don't know if there won't be a fire either. And they determined that the fires were started by humankind, but climate change certainly played a role. It was a very dry summer. And the conditions in the woodlands and in the areas where those fires traveled were extremely dry, which fed into that. It had been a very dry winter before that with little snow cover. So it doesn't matter really how it started. Once it starts, it's how it's going to travel. So I'm getting a little testy. I have a headache and I'm tired. However, safety is the thing. And the recommended motion to me doesn't improve the safety of the residents of this municipality. As a matter of fact, it's regressive. It triples the amount of homes that could be built in this area down here on a single access road, triples it, and increases the amount everywhere else by 50% because we'd like to allow accessory units. Well, I'd like to allow accessory units too. If by allowing them, we have a reasonably safe option for them to get out if there is a wildfire. I can't get past the safety issue of it, I'm sorry. And had there not been a motion on the floor, I was going to move number 4, which makes no changes at this time, and then move a motion to continue this at some point in the future, maybe ask for more, I don't know. But I don't think we're at a place to change what we're doing now, because I haven't heard anybody say that they think this is a great idea of anyone who has spoken. So I don't think we're going to create anything brand new at this stage of the afternoon without more consultation with staff and other people. And so I won't be supporting the motion to just simply cut off the discussion on the report because it doesn't tell me what we're going to do next. And that's why. Just to stop talking about it now doesn't tell us where we're going next. And I think we should at least have some idea if we're gonna pick this discussion up at a later date, if we're gonna ask staff for more information at a later date, or what we're going to do. So anyway, those are my comments. I still would not support the recommended motion. I do not support the motion on the floor without further clarification as to what we're doing next, and thank you.
Councilor Musa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I heard something about provincial roads, and so in our bylaw, like, what is the collector road? Like, it's a major highway, it's a provincial road. Like, we don't even have a definition for what the collector road.
So you, Mr. Chair, the provincial, Nova Scotia Public Works actually has definitions for all of the roads and classifies all of the roads. So they have them laid out as collector roads, arterial roads, local subdivision roads, and all of that. And when in one of my past reports, I think it was with the 50 dwelling units on one single access, in that report I actually outlined what each of those roads were under the provincial regulations, what they were considered. So all of the roads identified in this report are not collector roads and are not arterial roads under Nova Scotia Public Works definition of what a collector and arterial are.
Okay, like for instance, I don't know if you could put Old Mines Road. Like Old Mines Road go to Rockwell Drive, then you have Morning Breeze, but they all gonna connect at the end. And it's only like 1,000 feet of road that take everything, not even 1,000 feet, probably take everything to Highway 1. So to classify it as a high vulnerability, I think it's wrong, because I know the road really well, and I know I know everything on both sides on it. It's a provincial road, well maintained, and then you branch like few roads, and those few roads will add up to over 100. But each road by itself is not 100. So I don't think we could classify that as a high vulnerability. But and the Uniacke Mines Road, like, it's the same thing. It's a provincial road that get 2 off branches, but each one of them are less. I don't know. Like, it's very complicated, but I would like to see a solution. Like, I know the problem exists, but we need to figure out a solution. That's the main thing. And for something like that, the HAF, like whatever, is not something that we could use money for to create some like, it's hindering, like those stuff are hindering like the development of new homes and the most.
I don't know if we'd be eligible.
I'm not sure if that would be eligible under the HAF funding. It's something you'd have to investigate if council wanted to direct us to do so.
Well, I would love to investigate it, because that's good use for something to allow few big subdivision to keep going instead of stopping them and say, oh, sorry, we approve you, but we don't have enough, we didn't have enough information about our bylaw that we passed in 2002 or something. So I think we approve few subdivisions that are going to be affected by this one, and I think we should do something to allow them to continue, because they were sold and people paid for them big time because they were approved. And you cannot tell them, like, okay, your subdivision is approved, but I want to stop you right now. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reiner to the motion.
Yeah, I think it's doing a quick search here, tabling an agenda item. To table, if a board is not ready to vote, being lack of information sensitive topic, people need more time to process or deliberate, or urgent matters came up, the member may make a motion to table that item. The motion needs a second and it's not debatable. Or you could have a motion to postpone. So I do believe that Councillor Perry, I think, or is in order.
Thank you for that information. I've been waiting to have some comments, so I'm going to pass the chair over to the warden. I'm a resident of Elmwood subdivision, and when I purchased there in 1980. I was the last house on Elmwood, number 20. There was no tannery, no hemlock. So the rest has all been developed since then. I'm hoping that the construction of the FH developments will improve the access to getting in and getting out. We had an accident years back, probably 3 years back now, at the intersection of Elmwood and Highway 2. People that were still inside the subdivision couldn't get out, and the people that were trying to get home from work couldn't get in. That accident covered about an hour and a half, so there was another hour and a half that those people were inconvenienced, whether they had small school-age children at home or grandparents. Years back, we had flooding across from Elmsdale Lumber. It flooded that whole strip mall and also flooded the intersection of Elmwood and Highway 2. Trucks could get in, but cars couldn't get in or out. We've talked at the Elmsdale Fire Department about if there ever was a train derailment on that section of highway, and we have to evacuate Elmwood. We don't think it can be done safely. And my last comment is, we have a large percentage of first responders for Elmsdale Fire that live in the subdivision, probably a half to 2/3. So you can see that that one exit isn't advantageous, and we're hoping that improves with the development of FH. And those are my comments.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, folks, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Rhino has clarified that this motion is not debatable. So if we wish to have further discussion on this today, we will need to defeat the motion to table the discussion. If the motion passes to table this discussion, then I will at least be looking for some type of a motion as to when to bring it back and what to bring back. If we're asking for further information or if we're just going to pick this up next month or whenever. So, we will have the question on the motion to table this discussion. And the motion has passed by a vote of 11 to 2, with myself and Councillor Dixon voting nay. And I would just add that I voted nay because I felt that there should have been something in the motion to indicate what happens next. So I'll turn the chair back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Last item on the agenda.
Well, we should have a motion as to what we're doing next.
Motion to bring it back next month from anybody? Councilor Rhino, go ahead.
Well, from what I read, a motion to table is you don't have to have any specific, that can be brought up at any time. A motion to postpone is supposed to have a specific date. Now, this is what I've looked up and this is what I found.
Thank you for that. Warden Rolston?
I move to continue this discussion at next month's executive committee meeting.
Moved and second that we continue the discussion next month. Question being called on before the motion. Councilor Rhino. Whoops. Go ahead.
I would respectfully ask the extreme creator of this agenda to please allow enough time to carry on a lengthy conversation with regard to not, and if at all, have this in the morning, because if this is any indication, this may go for a long time. So whoever that extreme creator is, please take that into consideration.
I think that's been noted.
Question.
Question being called. Okay.
Do you need us to stay around or can we take off?
And the motion is passed, 12 with Counselor Perry voting nay. The last item on the agenda for planning, the Municipal Government Act changes, can be brought up next month, so we'll leave it there. The CAO wishes to speak? Go ahead.
So councilors, just looking at your agenda, we do have to go into a council meeting as well this afternoon. So I've been in contact with John just now, across the hall. We can move the Municipal Government Act changes to next Plan Advisory Committee. And then when we look at Parks, Recreation, and Culture, Scott is okay if we move all of those discussions to a budget meeting, with the exception of, we do want to have summer rates approved for the ice rentals for the Sportsplex before the end of this month. So perhaps we can just bring that to you as a motion of council. It's a fairly straightforward ask. To get that one rate approved, because we don't currently have summer ice rental rates because we've never had the ice in. So if we can bring that to you at council as a agenda line item, then we can move these items to budget discussion to be presented. You've all seen the reports. They're, we weren't looking for any direction from council on Sportsplex rates today anyway. They were going to be for consideration of budget, so we can move that to a budget meeting if need be. That's all the Parks Recreation can all go to that budget cycle.
Agreed?
Yeah.
It's agreed to move Park and Rec to
Does anyone object to moving as
Park and Rec.
discussed?
Well, we can do the minutes.
Okay,
We're good?
we're good. We're past due for a 10-minute break,
Okay.
however long it was supposed to be.
Want to thank the public members for hanging in with us. It's been welcome. Thank you, staff. Motion to adjourn. Break for 10 minutes.
We'll resume for council.
Council at 4:50.
The committee held its regular meeting on January 21st, 2025, and the following motion is coming forward as a result of that meeting. The only item, procurement policy update, low value threshold. The procurement officer presented a report recommending increasing the low value threshold at which an invitation quotation is required from $5,000 to $10,000. The original threshold has not been changed since 2012. The Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommends that council give notice of intent to amend the procurement policy as attached to the executive agenda January 21st, 2025. As chair of the committee, I so move.
Seconded.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. So Councillor Perry, did you have a question, or is your mic just?
My mic was on before she started. I wanted to add something to it.
And the motion is passed unanimously.
As chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
That was supposed to include the fire, too. Remember the motion for committee was for fire as well?
Okay, council members, this has not been updated since we moved the motion at the committee level, and the words for the fire part of it were supposed to be added there to the motion. I don't remember the exact wording. CAO?
That motion's already been passed, so another
Mhm.
motion would be that the, give notice that the fire department, the financial guidelines for volunteer fire departments also be amended to include a $10,000 threshold for quotations.
Okay, so the Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommends that the financial guidelines of the volunteer fire departments also amend their procurement, also
Amend the low threshold for
amend the low
quotations.
threshold to $10,000.
Yeah.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Rhino. Any discussion? Question's been called. Motion is passed unanimously. Councillor Garden Cole, did you want to move the adoption of the report?
Oh, as chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. My apologies, Councillor Perry. I will move to you. You wanted to add an item to the agenda.
Yes, Madam Order. No problems there. I'd like to insert an item after number 3, a procurement item for council before the in-camera discussion.
Thank you, sir. Has council agreed to that? Agreed? Councillor Rhino?
I need more information on this. You're adding this to the thing without prior, like, you just want to add something at this late date? Like, is it life-threatening?
Well, are you making it a motion to add that, Councillor?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder then? Moved and seconded. So Councillor Rhino would like more information. We can do that, or we can do that in the discussion once the procurement item is added. So are you
Well, I
ready
mean,
for the
it-
question?
I can expand on it if you want, Madam Order.
Well, I just don't want to have the discussion twice, is all. So go ahead, Councillor Perry.
The motion I'm making is to replace these chairs because we have 7 to 12 broken, and that there's money in the budget to have it done this year before going into next fiscal. So that's the motion I was going to make, because we're switching chairs around so people can have a chair they can actually sit in is kind of ridiculous at this point in the game.
Okay. Are you ready for the question? Are you ready for the question? Question's been called. This is to add that item to the agenda. And the motion is passed by a vote of 9-2, with Councillor Rhino voting nay. Okay, item number 2, Planning Advisory Committee report. Over to you, Counselor Mitchell.
The committee held its regular meeting on January 21st, 2025 in council chambers. The following motions are coming forward as a result of that meeting in order to meet advertising deadlines to permit public information meetings to be scheduled. First one is the Shaw Group, MPS and LUB amendments. The municipality has received an application for the Shaw Group Limited to change the land use designation for a portion of PID 450-86980 from industrial commercial IC designation to medium density residential neighborhood MR designation, and rezone the same portion of PID 450-86980 from industrial commercial IC zone to the townhouse R2T zone. The purpose of the application is to allow for the construction of 4 8-unit stacked townhouse buildings. Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting to consider an application from the Shaw Group Limited to amend the MPS and LUB by changing the land use designation of a portion of PID 450-86980 to medium density residential neighborhood MR and rezoning the same portion of land to townhouse R2T zone. As chair of the committee, I so move.
We have a seconder, seconded by Counselor Tingley. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. Motion is passed unanimously. Back to you.
Second item, mini homes and accessory dwelling units. In June of 2024, East Hants Municipal Council passed a motion directing staff to explore the possibility of permitting small mini-home dwellings as accessory dwelling units. The report outlined the current regulations for accessory dwelling units and proposed changes to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to allow mini-homes to be used as accessory dwelling units. Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to permit small mini homes as accessory dwelling units. As chair of the committee, I so move.
Second it.
Seconded by Counselor Dixon. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question has been called. Motion is passed unanimously.
As chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Seconded by Counselor Hebb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion is carried. We will now move to 3A. Over to you, Counselor Perry.
I'll move that council provide up to $25,000 budget and direct the CAO to purchase new chairs for council chambers in the 2024-2025 fiscal year using available funds from this year's council cost center and the balance to be paid from office equipment reserve. I so move.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Deputy Warden McPhee. Sorry. Any discussion on the motion? Counselor Hebb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'd get a little more information on the condition of the chairs. I wasn't aware there were any that were broke, and if there is, I don't have a problem with, but I mean, I've never heard really anybody complain other than the height being going up and down, and are we talking all the chairs in here, or just the ones the council sit on, or?
Okay, I'll turn that over to the CAO.
Through you, Madam Warden. So over the years, we've, these chairs are quite old. Over the years, we've had maintenance done on them. The reason the chairs that councillors have that were broken have been switched out for the directors' spots. So most of those chairs are broken. They've broken up here and we've just switched them out.
Switched another one today.
Now we're switching them between councillors who are taller and shorter, and so there is a justification for getting new chairs for this room. Yeah, that's what.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
That's,
We have had maintenance done on them to no avail.
Counselor Rhino.
Well, I'm rather surprised this couldn't wait till next Wednesday night. But anyway, here we are. I will not be supporting the motion. This is going to be seen. People are going to look at our on-camera session. And they're going to look around and they're going to say, well, everybody's in a chair. In this day, I preached on this, of the people having hardship, and yet we're gonna look around to changing our chairs. That doesn't have good optics, and I still don't see a reason for it, and as long as you leave me my hard one, I'll have to live with that. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I think if I can sit in a hard one, a lot of other people could too. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Question's been called. Somebody needs, the motion is passed by a vote of 10-1, with Councillor Rhino voting nay. Okay, moving on. The next item on our agenda is an in-camera land issue, followed by an in-camera contractual issue from Jesse. So I would be looking for a motion to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Hebb, seconded by Councillor Dixon. All those in favor? Maybe. Are we, no? So cameras are on before the mics.
There you go.
Okay, I would report that we met in camera to discuss a land and a contractual issue. Out of that meeting, we have one motion coming forward. Councillor Garden Cole.
Move that the Infrastructure and Operations Committee recommend to council that council give direction to the CAO to proceed with the alternative procurement practices for the desludging Cell 1 of the Lance Lagoon through direct negotiation with GFL Environmental.
Seconded by Councillor Head. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. That concludes our business this afternoon, councillors. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Rhino, seconded by the Deputy Warden. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. So